precisely 8:30 a.m. So welcome everybody back after our long day, but very informative day yesterday. And I do want to compliment every member of council and administration for, again, a very rewarding day. A lot of information presented. Council certainly had done their homework and came with a great many very thoughtful questions, and so it was a great informative day. So without further ado, I think everyone probably knows how today works. First off, we'll be having a presentation by administration for a few more housekeeping items. As you know, the budget is a product of work that takes place over many months, and it's scrubbed and it's tweaked and it's rolled up and rolled down and so on and so forth, and finally presented to us. But then in the meantime, there's still more information coming in, so we like things to be as up to date and as accurate right to the 11th hour as we can. So we'll be getting a report on those cleanup items first off. Then we will, in effect, be starting our formal meeting, the typical calling the actual meeting to order, at which time we'll ask somebody to put a motion on the floor to adopt the budget as presented, and then we start into our deliberations, which will entail presumably a series of amendments that will be moved and seconded as normal. We can go as deep as providing an amendment to an amendment. Well, that's as many amendments as we can make. We'll have to clean up an amendment to amendment before we can make further amendments. We'll steer through that. So I think that's the nub of it. We'll continue doing those amendments until council is satisfied that all the amendments that they wish to propose have been heard, however late that takes us, and then in the end hopefully we are able to pass the budget as amended. So without further ado, I'm going to first turn it over to Rod to make any opening remarks on behalf of administration, and he'll call up our admin to provide us the housekeeping items.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council. So as His Worship's indicated, today this is all about you asking questions, seeking, if you need to seek clarity, don't for a minute hesitate, ask the question. If administration isn't here, we'll ensure that we get the answer to you. They are basically all on standby, so we can call them at a moment's notice if we need to. I know that the GMs have been actively getting some feedback last night as well, even after deliberations were done. So we've got some answers to any questions you might have this morning if they come up. And again, Dean and Val will do what they traditionally do, track everything. We'll have that sheet up there that's able to track it, and then we can go from there. But again, I'll reiterate, there is no such thing as a bad question. So seek clarity, and we'll try to give you the information so you can make a sound judgment on the budget. So with that note, we will call either Val or Dean to the podium, and we can get the hurts and helps and do some housekeeping that needs to be done before we start today.
Good morning, everybody. So through your worship to council, the items that administration would like to bring forward for your consideration are as follows. So after the budget was prepared and presented to you, we are a letter of notification for our provincial recycling grant, and it is going to be $199,300 higher than what we estimated, so we'd like to add that amount to the budget as additional revenue. After yesterday's discussion about the transportation expenses relating to recycling, the manager did some calculations, and she has advised that we can reduce that expense by $63,384. As discussed yesterday with the vacancies within the information technology department and the restructuring within clerks, we've got a net reduction in salaries of $85,040. Within the city manager account, the vehicle allowance can be reduced by $3,000. Then, as mentioned at the end of the day yesterday by Andrew Wayu, there was in the property administration account contracts line entered for $40,000 that can be removed. Within the Heritage Cost Center, there's a summer student budgeted there that we hire every summer, and there's an error made there, and the budget is only for 7 weeks, and it needs to be 14 weeks. And so we'd like to add $8,737 to salaries for that summer student. The Grants Review Committee had submitted their recommendations to Council at the end of last year, and when those amounts were being entered into our budgeting software, there was an error made, so we would like to add $5,500 to that cost center. And as mentioned yesterday, for council indemnities, the budget was prepared using an estimate of 2% increase. The CPI, in fact, came in at 3.2. So we would like to add $37.70 to that account. When Heather was doing her presentation yesterday, she quoted the amount of $31.42. That is an error. It is, in fact, $37.70 that would need to be added to bring it to the 3.2%. And then, as well, transit revenues were discussed yesterday. The charter revenues can be increased by $41,000. And then there's one item that we would like to add. It does not affect the proposed mill rate, as we're proposing to take it out of the municipal building maintenance reserve, and that's the phase 2 cost for the stone fence rehabilitation. So that is not in the budget. Was a presentation to council at the last council meeting discussing that whole project. So phase 1 in 2017 was taken out of the municipal building maintenance reserve, and so we're proposing to take phase 2 out of that as well. That was what we had on our list. Thank you.
Val, can you tell us what the net total of all those ins and outs are? You have that?
Oh, $413,717.
Very good. And then I presume you or Dean are going to roll that into what our sort of new starting point is in terms of the tax increase. We started yesterday presumably at 1.9%, and then these will by themselves shave off probably about 0.9, but I don't know if Dean's got that figured out.
So if all those amendments are accepted in total, that would bring our mill rate down to a 0.92% increase.
0.92, okay. Yeah, so we're not going to our approach. These administrative changes are sort of presented by administration as though they were already in the book, so they're sort of considered to be our base starting point. That's just not to say that council, such as everything else that's in the book, that council has to accept everything that administration just presented. So the things that Val just presented are also obviously eligible for council amendment. If we don't like the council indemnity amount, they're really just putting in what's sort of required by bylaw. If we want to vary that, then we put up an amendment and change it, or any of the others that have just been presented are equally eligible for amendment, as is everything else that's in the big book. So I don't think we need to kind of, how would I put it, deliberate or move any. These aren't considered amendments. These are administrative housekeeping sort of added to our book, to our starting point. They can be changed as council see fit.
So if I may, Your Worship, if you're not going to change any of these, though, we will have to adopt a motion to include them because they were not part of the original budget.
Oh, okay.
So it is an amendment per se. But
Okay, I beg your pardon. We usually just consider these as part of.
sorry.
All right, well then we'll deal with that. Probably one of our first items when we open up the meeting, that I would suggest a kind of a omnibus motion to put all of those in. Then we can pick and mix and take out, or vary any of them that were put in there just the same as the rest of them. Okay, with that said, although I'm not going to certainly disqualify any questions, since these are just right in front of us. I should have did this while Val was still up there. If we want to ask questions of these specific ones before they go into the omnibus, just so you can get clarify on any of these, I'm fine with that. So maybe come back up, Val, and go ahead, Councillor Berry.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Through to Val, or even Carla for that matter. On the discussion of the transit charter revenues, the 41,000, the increase in contract for Maple Leaf, is there also a cost associated with that too that should be in the budget? Or is it just a net $41,000 revenue gain and there's no cost to us?
That would be a net gain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions of any of these few items that were just presented? Very good, thank you. Okay, with that, I believe we're able to open our meeting, so you'll presume we all just arrived, and with that, we'll say first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Reading of the call, Your Worship. First of all, roll call. I've taken roll and all members of council are present. And I would note that notice of this meeting was provided to all members of City Council, advising that we will be having a special meeting at this date to deliberate the 2018 operating and capital budgets. And as there is quorum and in compliance with that notice given, it is lawful to proceed.
Thank you very much. Next item of business, please.
The 2018 budget deliberations.
We've got a motion to put it on the floor would be in order. Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Moreggio. I would normally ask if the mover and seconder wish to speak, but obviously we've got a huge amount before us. So the motion will be on the floor. We will commence to amendments. Now, what we've done in the past, I guess, was we've kind of gone around and around, and rather than have you kind of flesh out your amendment, we've asked councillors to kind of put up the topics that they intend to present, as many as we can. We won't consider that to be, how to put it, exhaustive or all-inclusive. Sometimes it's a bit of a dynamic process, but the ones that you know that you're going to present, and I'll just go around and around the table, just taking one from each of you at a time, just so we've got a bit of a list, because I think it's been our experience that you get a bit of a feel for where you want to go when you see what may be added or proposed for subtracting. And again, we'll still allow people to continue to making, if you don't put up these suggestions in the early times, although we'd like you to get as many on the table as you can. We're certainly not going to prevent people from coming in with others that they've heard and need to make adjustments as we go. Everybody fine with that process? It's kind of worked, and with the new seating arrangement, Councillor Cullen, you look like you're going to be first. No pressure.
In the hot seat. Thank you, Your Worship. The one, now again, I'm not really sure exactly, do you want it in the form of a motion?
No.
Or just
Kind of general topic, and if you can, the amount and administration. And again, you don't have to speak to it, argue for it, give you the rationale. Just give us what the topic is, and that's all we really need.
Not in any necessary importance or order of importance, the National Communities in Bloom evaluation of $13,908. I'd like to discuss that.
You?
Point of order, Your Worship, if I may, bear with me as these motions come up. I need to type them into the system, so bear with me. And maybe if we could put that up on the screen, then you can make sure that I'm capturing the intent of your motion. And also, I like to categorize them under our 7 different categories of service, or else whether they're under reserves or capital as well.
Okay, we'll try and go sufficiently slow so you can get that in. This is an important part of the process to get these all in. It'll take a little while, but we are sort of ahead of schedule for other years. We've normally spent Saturday morning discussing capital and reserves, which we got to do previously, so we're a little ahead of the game, hopefully. So you got that one, Dean? It was the Communities in Bloom National Evaluation. To the extent of, what was the number again?
13,908.
That is a decrease to the budget, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay, next, Councillor Patterson, if you will.
Thank you, Your Worship. I plan on bringing forward a motion to commit $1 million to capital at the Keystone Centre, with $500,000 coming from the accommodation tax reserve and $500,000 coming from general revenues.
You? Okay, you have that one, Dean?
Okay.
And Councillor Barry?
Thank you, Worship. I wish to put a notice in that I'd like to reduce from the transit budget. It's a combination of the transit running on stat holidays with non-retail operations open. There's a big difference between the stat holidays we were told about and the stat holidays with stores not being open, combined with transit overtime for a total of $45,000.
Thank you. And I should have said at the beginning, if you don't have to feel like you're have to put one in on every round, and if it's kind of like, well, no, I don't have one, that doesn't mean you're out for the day. We'll keep going around if you want to pass, and you're not ready and whatnot. So we're user friendly as possible. So you're good, Dean?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I'd like to bring forward a motion to reduce line 52-144 in the recycling operations, amount of about $93,000. Transportation.
Sorry, what was the amount?
93,000.
Okay, Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you. I'd like to increase the allocation to the Brandon Downtown Development Corporation to bring it to 300,000, so add 50,000.
You want to put one in, Val?
Yeah, all of the above.
Reggio.
Add $50,000 for the Brandon General Museum and Archives.
Okay, Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. I wanted to add $50,000 for the electrical vehicle charging station as in the form of a grant to the Riverbank Discovery Center.
Okay, Councillor Chaboyer.
I'd like to add 15,000 to the Grants Review Committee section of the budget to cover for the Winter Festival, 11,000 being for the insurance costs and 4,000 for operating.
So that was 11,000 for insurance?
Insurance and 4,000 for operating.
Sorry, 15,000 in
Yes,
total?
that's right.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Your worship, I have none.
Okay.
Not this time around, Rick, no.
Okay. And to myself, I would be moving that we reduce the rec center reserve appropriation by $100,000, down from 300, making it 200,000. Back around to Councillor Cullen.
I'm going to pass it over.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
I would like to reduce, I don't know which line it is in the economic development budget, by $5,000 for the Cool Gardens project, meaning I do not want to cover the provincial reduction. So I think they're asking for 10, 5 from the city original, and then there was a 5 from private.
Okay, Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to remove from the budget, page 94, line 52019 from engineering services, 40,000 from their consulting fees.
Pretty sure you said reduce, right?
Reduce, yes. Remove, reduce.
We're adding 40,000.
Take out.
Yeah.
Sorry, 40,000?
40,000, yes. Pretty specific to the question I asked yesterday. So.
Councillor Parker.
Yes, I would like to add $100,000 to go to community centers. I'm not sure what costing center we're community development or where exactly we might want that point, but capital improvements.
Sorry, did you say you wanted that to come out of capital or operating?
Or capital.
Further capital?
Earmarked for capital improvements to community centers.
Out of city operating?
No, wherever you need to put it in order to expend the money.
Essentially, it would be a grant.
That's what I've got. I'm on the community development page, and that's kind of where I assumed it would go. But
Val, go ahead.
So that would go under the grants review committee cost line, like as an additional grant to the community centers. Okay.
Okay, Councilor Desjardins?
I would like to add $16,000 for, to increase the downtown decorative lights along 10th between Rosser and Pacific.
Right, this is the permanent decorative lights, not the Christmas lights, right?
The decorative, yeah, the permanent decorative lights. Yeah. The globe lights, correct.
Councilor Reggio?
I don't have the budget line, but it's page 75, the rec facilities needs assessment, $75,000. I'd like that removed.
Clarify, is that page 75 in the operating or capital?
I'm sorry, I just wrote page 75. I went through this weeks ago, so sorry about that.
We will just clarify that I believe that's funded by capital, so it would have no operating impact on the budget.
Yeah, it must have been in capital because page 75 is like professional audit fees summary page, so had to be capital.
I'd still like it discussed.
Okay, Councilor Fawcett?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. I'd like to remove $100,000 from the fire services budget. I know, I'll go down in flames, but
no, just the general budget.
we'll discuss wherever you want to bring it from, but generally, they're 90% salaries, so it's not on pencils.
Okay, Councilor Chaboyer?
Thank you. I'd like to remove $25,000 from the snow clearing reserve.
Question on that, Your Worship, if I could, please.
Well, maybe we'll get to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Councilor Brown, you still good? Or?
Pass.
Okay. Councilor Harwood?
Your worship, on page 109 of 245, it's the costing, planning and development costing center. I'd like to reduce the consulting fees by $14,000, please.
Sorry, which cost center?
It's the planning and development. And it's line, sorry, under expenditures, it's line 52019.
Sorry, what was the amount?
$14,000.
Next up, I'm going to move that we reduce the fire vehicle reserve appropriation by $50,000. Okay, move back around to Councillor Cullen.
Your Worship, I'd like to reduce the Summer Lights Festival, that's the line 36 contract, in the amount of $10,000.
Chris has that.
And Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I would like to add $2,000. I suspect Grants Review might be the best place to do it. $2,000 for community garden water hookup and disconnect.
Garden water hookup.
Hookup and disconnect.
Councillor Berry.
Worship, on the transit budget, I'd like to reduce the budget by $25,000 based on reducing ending Sunday service at 6 p.m. based on presentation done in December from transit.
Sorry, the amount.
$25,000.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you. This one probably isn't popular in all circles, but I'd like to reduce the affordable housing appropriation by $100,000. Guess we'll talk about why later.
And Councillor Desjardins.
I'd like to reduce the allocation to the Library Arts Reserve this year, $50,000.
Councillor Loreggio.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just a general, but it has budget implications. I would like a freeze on any new positions to be created at a cost of over $50,000. At $50,000 plus.
Okay, we'll just sort of take that. I'll just going to sort out how we fit that
Probably under human resources or whatever, but it does have budget implications. Any new positions at 50,000 plus.
Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you. Through your worship, in police services, I'd like to remove $150,000. I know we don't get into detail, but maybe underline 51083, the $12,685,000. That might be weird.
Yeah, I think in their case, we would only just be.
I know, that's all.
Generally, I mean, you can use some of your rationale when you speak to it, but,
The amount, Jeff?
150,000.
Councillor Chaboy.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not sure what page number this was, and this is from a review we had of the reserves. It was the cumulative benefits reserve, reducing it down to zero. So my understanding would be $25,000 reduction, but I can't find the actual page right now, but it was from earlier discussions.
Okay.
You want to eliminate the reserve?
Yes, reduced to zero. So my understanding, I've got in my notes 25,000.
Bigger than that, isn't it?
25,000.
Okay, Ron, you're still good. Councillor Harwood.
Your Worship, the costing center is property administration. Page 114 of the operating budget, it's expenditures line 52015 under contracts, and would like to reduce that by $10,000, please.
Okay, I'm up next. This will be a little more cumbersome. I've done this in the past. I'm moving that we reduce the machinery and equipment appropriations by $200,000. And typically, we've done this before, typically the administration spreads it. Obviously, that goes in many categories and cost centers, so that kind of gets done after the fact if that passes. So it's reducing machinery and equipment reserve, essentially the appropriations by 200. Got it? Okay. That Councillor Cullen again.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to make a motion that we reduce the youth center's budget by $10,000. That is line 14, community programming.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to add $10,000 in a grant to the provincial exhibition as a final contribution to the Dome building project.
Barry?
Your Your Worship, I'm actually going to throw an add-on in this one. I'd like to add $400,000 to street repairs specifically for milling and paving projects in the city of Brandon for next summer, or this summer, I guess. Milling and paving.
Councillor Parker?
Pass, I'm just doing a bit more math. Thank you.
Councillor Desjardins?
I'll pass this again.
Councillor Reggio? Awesome.
I'm going to pass them as well. Audrey.
Hang on, my math's not that quick. So
I'll slow it down.
Boyer?
Hold on.
Okay. Councillor Harwood?
I'll pass.
Okay. Back to me. I'm going to move that we add $15,000, I guess, in grants for Simplot Millennium Ballpark.
Is it 20?
Pardon?
Sorry, was that 20,000?
15,000.
15,000.
Sorry. Got it? Councillor Cullen.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that we add $100,000 to sports facilities in regards to replacing the soccer fields we lost during the flood, whether that be at Veterans Way or whatever we need to do in order to move that forward. $100,000.
And back to Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. One isn't going to have an impact on the budget. I think it's just a global thing, but I do want to make a motion with respect to crystal methamphetamine in our community. But I'm not exactly sure how I want to word it quite yet, but it isn't like to allocate funds to it. It's just more that we need to team up and focus on the problem, like a general statement from council. So I'll work on the wording throughout the day.
Okay. Back to Councillor Berry. Give us maybe a complicated one so Councillor Parker has more time to do math.
Like me to slow this down just a bit?
my pace.
Page 225, the Sportsplex concessions operating budget, I'd like to reduce by $25,000.
All right, 25,000.
25,000, yes.
Parker?
Reduce the police chief's salary by.
Specific line.
Timing's everything.
Timing is
Council 10. I'd like to reduce the civic services complex reserve by 25,000.
Back to Councillor Desjardins.
I'd like to reduce the human resources operating budget by 20,000.
And Councillor Reggio?
I might need some help on this one. Depending on the outcome of what happens this afternoon, I'd like to propose a 1% general cut in the budget, period.
These are very global.
Exactly, 1% across the board. And that's why I said I'm also going to ask for the right to withdraw this. I just want to see how it ends this afternoon. I tried it last year and I got no support, but this year I'm just going to go with a straight 1% across the board.
You want a straw poll on that right now, or?
No,
That's
let's see how the day progresses, and at noon I'll withdraw it because we'll see how it goes.
Okay, Councillor Fawcett?
Yes, I'm actually going to put in here, I'll just use an arbitrary number, $50,000 in vacancies, and that's partly just to put this on the table so we can have that discussion. It may not go through, but I want it to be discussed.
So that's an additional 50,000 in
Additional
vacancy.
50 in vacancies. Just to be discussed.
Essentially, you're talking the vacancies allowance?
Yes, that we already have in the budget quite high, but so we can discuss it.
And back to you, Councillor Chaboyer. Anything?
There's another one that we discussed when we were reviewing the reserves. It was the perpetual care reserve. I would like to reduce that by $10,000.
Okay, over this side, Ron, Jeff.
Yes, Your Worship, page 95, Engineering Services is Costing Center. It's line 59139 under Expenses. It's conference costs, and I'd like to reduce the conference cost by $10,000, please.
Sort of a two-part one, but I will follow the rules and enter these one at a time. So the first piece would be adding in revenue $100,000 in cannabis taxation revenue. On this, since that'll be a decrease in the budget.
Take this from what council will buy. Gonna grow it in your backyard, right?
Article, you get that just from council.
Huh?
Said if you'd read the newspaper article 2 months ago, you'd get that just from council by the looks of this.
That's what I just.
That was my inspiration. Back to Councillor Cullen.
I'm going to pass this round.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you.
Councillor Berry.
Your Worship, thank you. I'd like to remove from the disposable site sanitation reserve line 1544, $75,000. Oh, sorry.
Can you repeat that?
Remove from the disposable site sanitation reserve line 1544, $75,000.
Back to Councillor Parker.
Oh, meatloaf. Just took the words right out of my mouth, so I'll pass.
Okay. Councillor Desjardins.
I would like to add $20,000 to the environmental initiatives budget.
Say it again, 20,000 to the which?
To environmental initiatives.
Back to Councilor Reggio.
Sorry, Chris, I missed the amount.
1,000?
Councilor Fawcett.
I think I'm good right now, though I might remove myself from the room for just 1 minute, and I'll be right back.
Oh, I think we have to vote on that. That could be amended.
Oh, boy.
Unless it's your wife.
Amended to removing you for 60 minutes.
Moving for the day?
Leaves, then you can, now feel free to talk about them. Councilor Chaboyer, you're next.
Thank you, Worship. Just one small request. After all the list is in, is it possible to get a printout? Because I started to write them down and I like to follow along on a piece of paper, all of them.
Yeah, probably what we'll do is we'll get to the end of the list. Again, realizing that doesn't prevent from, like Councilor Reggio said, he threw one in, he may withdraw it, others may add some later. It's not going to be totally exhaustive. We're going to know, hopefully we got most of them, whatnot. So when we get the list done, I think it'll be a good time for a break, and that'll give the administration a chance to print it off. So
Yeah, it's
that'd be
just
a good
easier
idea.
to follow along on one sheet as opposed to part of a screen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can't see the screen in detail myself, so I'm ready. So thanks for that suggestion. You didn't have another amendment right now then? Councilor Brown, Councilor Harwood, any?
I'm good, Your Worship. That's fine, thank you.
Okay, back to myself. It's kind of the second half or springboards from the one I just put in about cannabis revenue. I want to then add an expenditure of $15,000 for a youth addictions prevention initiative. I'm not really sure at this point what costing center that will land. Back around to Councilor Cullen.
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that we remove $25,000 from the rec center budget, the golf course. Yes, please.
Okay, we're back to Councilor Patterson.
I'm good.
Councilor Berry.
Your Worship, I'd like to remove from the budget, under the transit budget, the position of transit bus trainer for a cost of $70,000.
Sorry, how much?
70,000.
And Councilor Parker.
Yes, I think I'd like to reduce the municipal building maintenance reserve appropriation by $25,000. Or if you're looking.
Those 25?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, back to Councilor Desjardins.
I'm good for now.
Back around to Councilor Reggio.
For now.
Councilor Fawcett.
I'd like to add myself back to the discussion.
So noted.
at a cost to people's sanity.
This early, it's going to be a long day.
Councilor Harwood?
Good.
Okay. Myself, I'm not positive how I'll even vote on this, but I just want it on there. I'm going to call it Reduce Summer Lights Concert Series by 10,000.
Is that already in there?
No, that's different. That's different.
Festival.
That's why I put it in there, just so that we will discuss both of them, and probably when the time comes, I'll see that we sandwich the two discussions together.
Sorry, I missed that one completely.
So reduce the Summer Lights Concert Series by 10,000. Councilor Cullen.
I'll pass this time.
Mr. Patterson?
Still good.
Barry?
I think we need to have this discussion in budget, even though we got an email from Mr. Burton there a few days ago about the Tournament Champions request. Even though it's kind of a wash, there was no need to add it in the budget line and everything else. I think we still have to pass it here as a motion that we've agreed to that for this year. No? We don't? It's good? Okay, that's fine. I'm good then.
Okay, but you can have another one if you wanted. Are you done?
No, that's good. I'm good for now.
Okay.
I'll pass it.
Okay, Councilor Parker?
I'd like to reduce the, can't remember exactly where it is, the IT appropriation by $150,000. Technology.
To the reserve.
Well, yeah, I guess reducing the capital expenditure and then the appropriation will come as part of that.
No, separate
separate
items.
ones?
Yeah. So is there a specific capital project that you don't want them to do?
Yes.
Okay, then that's what, well,
radio
then that would be
system?
two separate things.
Okay. The radio system capital expenditure for 2018. $450, I believe is the number, $450,000.
Val?
Could I just ask for clarification then? So I know you're going around the table sort of one at a time, so are we putting both of those items in right now? The appropriation as well as that specific project?
So I wasn't positive that, what, was that two different items? Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think we're getting near the end of the line for most councillors, so let's just consider both of those from Councillor Parker added to the list. Okay, well, that confused me as well, so that was 450 radio system and then an additional 150 from the IT reserve
Appropriation.
appropriation.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Desjardins, anything?
I would like to add 50,000 for the implementation of a downtown ambassador program for the city of Brandon.
Okay, background, I'm not sure if this side was done. Councillor Reggio, Councillor Fawcett, Chaboyer, Brown, okay. And believe it or not, I'm presently done. Councillor Cullen.
A couple of things that I wanted to do, but I think I'm going to pass.
You're not going to put in that grant for Drummers Rehabilitation Center.
No, it's like free parking and handicap parking, those kind of things.
Call it a media drummer room.
Yeah. Councillor Patterson.
Good, thanks.
Barry.
Thank you, Worship. Just one last one. It's actually a broad-based one. I'll leave it to administration to kind of look at. When going through the budgets, one of the lines that kind of surprised me was the jumps in it, and actually we just talked about it, was contracts right across the board. And across the city, there's most of the lines of contracts are up. So I'd like to see a reduction of $100,000 in our contracts across the board for the city, and I'll leave that to administration to decide where they're going to come from.
We could probably do this when you move it and we discuss it, but I think sometimes there's a focus on consulting fees, and then there's in my view, like contracts and consultants are, if you're wanting it that broad, that's
Sure,
fine
we
as
can make it that
well,
broad
or
if
do
we
you
want.
want it specifically consulting, or is it like contracts, or sometimes like the cleaning contract for the building is in contracts, right? And
Well, this one was specifically contracts. The contract lines across the board were up a lot.
Contracts? Okay.
Yeah. We can deal with consulting in another one. I got another turn coming yet, so.
Right. So that amount was 50,000 for the
100,000.
contract? 100,000? Okay. Back to Councillor Parker. And Councillor DeJarle.
I'd like to add $5,000 in support of the Brandon Bear Clan initiative.
Okay, I'm going to presume everybody on this side's done, as I am as well. Okay, Councillor Cullen?
Done.
Okay. Patterson? Okay, back to you, Councillor Barry.
We'll just go right back to that consulting one there, Your Worship. And again, across the board from city, the consulting fees I'd like to see reduced by 100,000 as well.
John, is that above and beyond my request to remove the 75,000 consulting for the?
Yep.
Okay.
That's a totally separate item.
Okay, back to
100,000, yeah.
Parker. You're done? Councillor DeJarle.
I have a question for Rod. I'm not sure if he would have the answer. Would you know what the cost would be to resurface the tennis court at Stanley Park? It's not the same surface that we have at the rec center, but the
Just asphalt. Just straight
just the asphalt.
Yeah, it's just the asphalt, and Your Worship, I believe that was done like 3 or 4 years ago. So if it's in that bad a shape, again, I would say we need to review it. I don't necessarily have the cost, but
Okay. Maybe we can.
yeah, I mean,
Put
that
that
was
in our
something you
better-
were completely interested. Maybe it's not, maybe this year's the review to determine options,
Okay.
and we make sure that for 2019,
Yeah, it wasn't a big priority, but it
Yeah.
is something we should be looking
Yep.
at.
Okay. Okay. That said, then it could still be your turn, Chris, if you're done then. We're probably back around, Councillor Barry.
I'm done.
Okay,
Be a short circle there, Barry.
yeah. And then
Barry.
you're also done, Councillor DeJarle then? Okay. Feel like an auctioneer here, going once, going twice. Again, knowing that everyone has the right to still pipe up with something, depending on how some of these others shake out. Councillor Chaboyer?
Thank you, Worship. I'd like it included as a discussion item that we talk about servicing unserviced back lanes. I just want to lose sight of it. I'm not requesting budget amount, but that administration look at it, so I'd like it included in the
Yeah,
discussion.
and some of these things, and I'm sympathetic to the issue. Bearing in mind, I mean, we're focusing just strictly on things that we need to change the budget for. Obviously, there's lots of things ahead of us in the year that we can discuss at any
But maybe I'll
given
just
time.
leave it for a future council
Yeah,
meeting.
naturally, we don't have any hesitation of
I just
having
want
the
to lose
discussion.
sight of it. I brought it
Yeah.
up repeatedly, yeah.
Almost called you Councillor Sage.
Councillor Sage. Your Worship, through you to Councillor Chaboyer, perhaps at Monday's council meeting, you could raise an inquiry for administration to provide an update on backlane strategies. Then it's a motion under council inquiries, and administration would be tasked to have to bring a report back to you.
Okay, I'm making that inquiry now, then, if you could.
Duly noted. Jackie, did you get that?
Okay. So coming back around in terms of potential budget amendments, I'm going to presume we're done for the moment, in which case we'll call for a 15, Councillor Berry.
Your worship, I just had a conversation we had yesterday. I just wondered if we need to amend the budget on councillor salaries for those that plan on taking leave for 5 or 6 weeks this year. It needs to be amended into the budget.
Who's going 5 or 6 weeks?
So there might be a reduction of a couple hundred or a few $100.
Well, I think it may be subject, we don't know whether or not that motion
Well, it
has
hasn't
passed
passed yet.
on
You're right.
Monday night.
Wouldn't that fall under vacancy management?
On their toes.
I did fail. We'll end up probably dealing with this, because I didn't deal with the omnibus, calling it motion.
No, you didn't.
Okay, so if with council's indulgent, we'll do that first when we come back. Okay, that said, it just reminded me that I would be moving, now this is going to be a piddly amount in dollars, but moving that council's indemnity for 2018 be adjusted by 1.4% versus the 3.2 that's brought back by the omnibus.
Your worship, can I clarify? So you're looking for a 1.4% over the 2017 rates?
Correct.
Okay.
Which would be a short reduction from once we've passed the omnibus.
What was the average between?
What was the average
The
between?
average between the two
Yes, it'll save us
adjustments there.
$4,000 or $5,000 back off. So. Okay, anything else? Okay, we're going to call a 15-minute break and ask administration if they could tidy that up and print it off for councillors, please. much as I originally told you, I think we're ahead of schedule because we didn't have to review in detail the capital and reserves. We do have about 55 amendments to debate here, so we still definitely have our work cut out for us. That said, I would like to, the staff are just tidying up and printing that list, so we'll get into that. We'll also, in respect of our staff, some of whom have come in for this and arrived, so we're going to not necessarily follow the motions in order. If council will permit us to do that with respect to the personnel that are here, the chief of police is here, and the director of IT and the director of fleet. You see the executive of fire here. Carla's here, and I think Perry is on his way in, and perhaps Linda as well. So the first thing we're going to tackle, though, is the omnibus motion based on the housekeeping items that were presented. So we're going to consider that an overall amendment, moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Barry. Mover wish to speak at all?
No, Your Worship, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We'll put it in, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you. Any discussion on that, to that standpoint? Seeing none, question on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now, I may need a bit of help from administration here to deal with, I'm not going to play favorites necessarily. I know we've got the police chief here, and there are several police potential motions to be put. So I think that I'm just going to start there, and you'll all have to help me out here, those of you that know that you had motions with respect to police, and it's not necessarily that the chief will have to speak to them, but will be on hand as we're debating the police-related matters, be available as a resource if called upon. So whoever wants to start, again, I've got the scratched handwritten one here, so Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you. Through your worship, mine is not specific as it is with the police service. I think we have a few that are out there that are specific to vehicles and things like that, but mine is, I want it on the table for, it was $150,000 reduction in police services, which we know as a council we only deal with the budget. I just want this on the table. We can debate it as such.
Yeah, so just go ahead and make your amending motion. There's a seconder, and then you'll be able to speak to it as to why and how.
A motion to remove $150,000 from police services.
There's a seconder for that, Councillor Desjardins. And now the mover may speak. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Through your worship, I do want to comment that the police board has done a good job with their budget this year. A number of the things that we've tried to address over the last few years have actually been implemented in this year's budget. They do have a $200,000 space that they've allocated already in this, plus an additional 75 in the reductions. Thank you. And but I want us to know we can't have city budget discussions without discussing the fact that emergency services in particular, but police and the fire, they have the largest portion of our budget. The salaries in the last 20 years, since 2001 in particular, have grown quite astronomical. We've never really dealt with them, partly assuming we won't hear again, but we've got a request in here for more positions. Even over the past 2 decades, had we been 1% or so less on increases, we could have easily put these people in to that job without having sort of budget increases. They're the highest salaries in the city, largest increases usually. In the long run, as a councillor, I do think that somewhere along the line, the chickens do come home to roost for municipalities when we can't rein in salaries on some of these emergency services. So I'm just putting it out there for discussion. I do want to suggest that they've done as good a job as they can. I believe it's over 80% of their budget is salaries. It's actually close to 90 probably. Of course, it's just $150,000, 12 million plus in just salaries. Their job to look where they would do this reduction as the way the board is set up.
Okay, done there, Councillor Fawcett?
I think so.
Well, you'll get another kick at the cat. So don't, and go to the seconder next right to speak, please.
Through your worship, this is always very challenging, I think, for council, because we, like many other municipalities, are facing astronomical protective services costs. We're certainly not in the same position that, say, a city like Winnipeg is, where it takes up a larger chunk of change in regards to their overall budget. And I do not envy the position that our police services are in right now, facing a crisis with crystal meth in our city. That being said, I do agree with Councillor Fawcett that we eventually, as a council, have an obligation to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I'm not sure where I sit right now on the amount that he's suggesting, but I do think I do think that we might want to consider a reduction of some sort here, just to make a statement that this is something that we're taking very seriously as a community. I think taxpayers are exhausted with the increases in protective services and fire, notwithstanding the challenges that we face as a community right now. So I'm hoping to hear more from the rest of council before I make the final decision on this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cullen next.
Yes, Your Worship. Just before I go, I'm going to get Dean to run a number for me because he's the math whiz. What is the 150? What is that as far as a percentage reduction in the police budget? So what are we asking for right there as far as that particular number? Again,
Sorry, Rick, sorry. If I may,
Yeah.
is that 100, you want the percentage over their entire budget?
What this
or just
motion
their
is over the entire budget.
Entire budget, not just their salaries?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's just over 1%, but we'll let them give you the exact number.
1%. Okay. So getting back to the conversation, it's like if it's one of the biggest pieces of the budget, we've asked other departments to stay within mandate. I understand that there's a challenge that's out there with the new initiative with the crystal meth, but it's not like we don't have 130 employees of this particular division. It's not like we're asking them to reduce staff. We're asking them to refocus on a different problem. And so in order for us to increase staffing in both the civilian and in the sworn officers, it's going to cost our money. We've got 3 new positions in this budget. 2 of them are coming from the police department right now. So again, you don't have to look too far to figure out where the growth is or the added growth to the budget. So that's our 150,000 is a small percentage as compared to what it would be if you were asking to do something that was 100,000 or 200,000 in the budget. Like this is millions. So anyway, that's where I'm at right at this present moment. So what are we talking about again? We're talking about a 1% reduction in the entire budget.
Yeah, I come up with
That even
1.07, but
0.07. Yeah. Okay.
And Councillor Berry was next.
Actually, thank you, Worship. If you can indulge me, I'd actually like to have Chief Balkin come and answer a question for me, if you could,
Certainly.
please.
Mind coming up, Chief?
taser on him, that's all, so.
All right, just before we start, go ahead, Val.
If I may, Your Worship, so the 150,000 over their net cost center, which would include their revenues, would be 1.15%. If that was over just their expenses, it would be 0.97.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Worship, through to Chief Balkin. On this conversation, we talked about police services and kind of the things that are going on in our city, so to speak. And when we talk about a 0.9% decrease to a police budget, which is fairly large, one of the biggest ones we have in the city, it doesn't seem like much. But when you put it to a cost perspective, about $150,000, and have to put it directly to a service, what does that mean that the police are not going to do for us this coming year because we might cut the budget by 150? What program, what service, what manpower is that going to affect? How is it going to affect the safety of the citizens by taking 0.9% out of the police budget?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Berry. Just to set the stage for this is we went through our budget line by line this year, as we do every year, and presented to the police board. Then the police board viewed all of our lines as well. Any of our areas that we could possibly reduce, we did, and also looked at a vacancy management assessment of $275,000 to reduce our budget even further. Once our budget was approved, and it was strange as it sounds, myself and our finance officer went through our budget the following day after the police board approved it and found an additional $40,000 in savings that we put into this budget. So the areas that I can remove to keep the service functioning on a day-to-day basis are very limited. It basically comes down to human resources. So without moving forward with the plan that we've put forth, I need to find some resources internally, have this program go forward. The methamphetamine addictions problems and the methamphetamine coming into the city. We're going to dedicate officers to that as well as the human exploitation. So I will find that internally. Where that will come from and what services, I can't take away from frontline services right now, simply because our calls for services have risen significantly over the past several years. Members that are on platoon are taking more calls. Number of calls coming up are increasing. So where these services will come from will likely be support services, and that is our community policing areas. And school resource officers are usually in that area. I saw what happened this year when we had a school resource officer due to internal promotions and the number of staffing positions that we had inside. We had to move a school resource officer out of that position for almost 2 weeks, and I had lots of emails, discussions from the school board and schools themselves. So reduction of service will come from some of our support services areas, which include, as I said, the school resource officers or the community policing, which will affect our ability to offer services to.
Thank you. I don't have any other hands up currently. Councillor Chaboyer?
Thank you. I'd like to speak against the motion. I don't need the...
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chief. Don't go too far away, though. Go ahead, Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I hope Council would reconsider supporting this motion, because if you would have all attended my last ward meeting, you would have heard from the residents about some of the issues we're facing with increased property crimes. And I know that, and it's, through our analysts that we have with the police department, there's a correlation between some of the crystal meth issues we're dealing with. So we do need extra resources related to this, and we need experts too. I'm a little disappointed when I hear that let's look for cheaper ways of doing things. For example, some of the commissionaires programs, rent-a-car programs. We've also had discussions around this table in previous years about RCMP. They are not available. I've also tried to contract out for, in my other job about security services. I've contacted commissionaires. They're not available to provide resources to Brandon. And I really think that in respect to the duties we do, we need professionals doing the special tasks that we've been assigned this year to deal with the drug issues that are facing our youth and our community. And they've already committed to the vacancy management program, so I will not support this motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Harwood next.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too am not going to support this motion. I think we have to understand that as a city, we're growing. There are increased calls for policing. We have some issues starting to percolate through the community now with meth and everything that's attached along with it. And I think we need to be aware of it. We need to start making attempt to deal with it. And yep, it does take a huge piece of the city's budget. But it's one of those things that as Brandonites, we need. It's not. We have to let the service do the job that they've been hired to do. It's not an easy job that they have, and it's getting more complicated and more tasks placed on their plate all the time. So, I think I would hope that council would defeat this motion and let the service move on the programs and the plan that they have in place and that they presented to us.
Here we have Councillor Patterson next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am also going to speak against this motion, and I don't want to repeat what previous councillors have said, but I do really want to touch on how addiction to crystal meth and sexual exploitation are a growing problem in our city. Being a councillor since 2014, there has not been another problem that I have heard about on such a regular basis, and also seen for myself. Just a personal anecdote, I often go to the Y pretty early in the morning for 6 a.m. and there was one morning I was driving through my ward, the residential area, and I saw two young women out on the sidewalk, and it just seemed odd at 10 to 6 in the morning that these girls were out there. And then just a few weeks later, Brandon Police did take down a home right in that area, and it really hit home for me that this is happening a couple of blocks away from where I live. And I have to say that I'm surprised that BPS didn't come forward asking for more resources. I'm really impressed that they have taken a close look at what they're doing, and they are asking us for exactly what they need. I also know just from other work in the community that the BPS is on the ground on this already. They are maxed out at working with community organizations, at being out there, at connecting with citizens that do need help. So I just think it is incredibly important that we keep these resources in the BPS budget. And blue sky, maybe in a few years they'll be able to come back and say, you know what, we've clamped down on this. We figured out how to stop this crisis in our community, and we can reevaluate the resources. But today, I think it is just incredibly important. As a city, we are really limited in what we can do. We don't provide addiction services. We don't provide mental health supports. But this is one way we can do it. One way we can is to give BPS the tools they need to stop crystal meth from coming into our community.
Thank you. And Councillor Reggio next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to vote against this. To say that this is one of our biggest expenditures, so let's cut back a bit, 1% to me doesn't make sense. Later tonight, or today, we're going to discuss an ambassador program for downtown, putting money into that. Downtown is one of our biggest troubled areas. An ambassador program, I'd rather have a couple of extra cops down there instead of an ambassador waiting for someone to come downtown. Let's be blunt. I work downtown. I see stabbings, bear spray incidents on a weekly basis down there. We try to provide everything to everybody as a city service, and I'm going to say this. We have to start looking at what services are priorities, where are we going to spend the money, and I think our emergency services, I hear people complain we have too many police officers. That same person complains that their shed was broken into, the cops are taking too long to come answer. So what do? So I hope everybody votes against this.
Councillor Parker, next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that we've probably done what Councillor Fawcett intended us to do here, was to talk about this publicly. I don't think he really believed we were going to take $100,000 or $150,000 out of the budget, to be honest. So I think the healthy debate was exactly what he was hoping to foster by bringing this forward. And as we talked in our informal meeting with the police board and the chief, there is an issue that we have to deal with, and this isn't the year to cut this budget. So I too will be voting against.
Thank you. And myself down next, and I guess echo what Councillor Parker said. I will credit Councillor Fawcett for having the courage to put this up, because I do believe it's a discussion that needs to be had publicly, and I know Councillor Fawcett doesn't feel that comfortable in being the one to have to do that, but I credit him for doing so. Again, I do believe, as many others have said, that this is not the time. It pains me to say this, but we are at sort of the TSN turning point. We're just at this precipice of a problem that could be a even significantly worse problem for our community. The police board, and I don't mind telling, because Councillor Barry and I sit on the police board, that it was not an easy proposition to get to the budget that you are seeing. We in fact ended up with 3 separate board meetings strictly on the budget. The first cut at it didn't fly. It was even significantly higher when they first rolled it up than what you now see, and it got worked at to get down to a more possible level. And then the inclusion of sort of the $177,000 special initiative, and again, this is the police board and the police administration being fully open with council and the community that we have a problem in our community. They want to add extra resources to that problem and go hard at it, and it's an approach that I support. On the other side, we've seen the calls for service increase annually by a significant amount. And I apologize, I don't have the statistics, but it's a large jump. So the number of calls per service per officer has been increasing significantly, and they're not all, unfortunately, kind of necessarily in the crime category. The vast majority of the increase is from what I would call mental health issues, and the call for service kind of doesn't matter. Like the police service is kind of the only one that's open 24/7. So they're the ones that get called, on a Friday at 3 o'clock in the morning when all the other health services are closed. Many of them are sort of Monday to Friday operations. Police service is the only one that's really there. They're the one that gets called. They got to deal with the issue that adds to their calls for service. So to think that we can put extra efforts into this special initiative by just reallocating from current operations is, kind of a fool's errand in my view. We're already overstretched in that regard. I think that doing this, and if council will support it, does send a significant message to the police service and more importantly to our community, that council is also joining in the police service in kind of drawing a line in the sand. This doesn't cure everything. This is not going to deal with addictions. As Councillor Patterson says, we're not sadly in the health business. We don't have that expertise. It's not our jurisdiction. A couple areas that we do have jurisdiction over, we do have the jurisdiction over the enforcement piece, and that's the piece we need to just step up and work our part of the scenario and hope that the other players in this, Prairie Mountain Health, Manitoba Health, other addictions services, and I do believe they are contemplating the problem as well, and that they're going to hopefully step up and aid with their part. So needless to say, I'm going to vote against the amendment, but I do credit Councillor Fawcett for getting it out there for us and that we can all put our sentiments on the table. I didn't have any other hands up so far. So, Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through your worship. As I've already said, this is an incredibly difficult challenge that our community faces. And like I am going to vote against this, but I'd like to remind everybody how important what you've stated, where it takes more than just enforcement to tackle this situation. North America has failed miserably on the war against drugs. We've spent trillions of dollars to try and battle this. It's an epic failure. There's more drugs flowing through cities in North America now than there ever has been. We can keep throwing money at this, but unless we're ready to tackle it and do some more creative and innovative things and start collaborating with preventative efforts, this is not going to go away. I'm going to vote against this, and I wish BPS all the best this year, and I hope that we get some. I really hope we get some tremendous results. Obviously, but our province, our federal government, our community, our people really need to start looking at other ways in which we can handle this situation, because we are losing this battle.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Just briefly, dovetail a little bit with Councillor Desjardins. I would like to task the chief with bringing us semi-regular updates on how the war is going with this crisis that's happening, and if we're allocating bodies toward that. I'd like to see the kind of results that we're garnering and be able to pass that on. So.
The council does have a obviously conduit to the police board through representatives on the police board, namely Councillor Berry, myself, presently the city manager as well, and so we can certainly, council has obviously access to information that can be provided through that, and I'm sure we'll be glad to keep council informed as to what information we're capable of passing through. Any other, Councillor Harwood?
Yes, Your Worship. Just before you call the vote on the amendment, can I ask that we have a recorded vote, please?
Sure can. Councillor Cullen.
Yes, Your Worship. Just on this subject, if in the back of my brain, I've got two things going on here. I've got obviously a social conscience that I want to advance the ball and make sure that we can nip something in the bud if that's what's happening with the drug issue. On the other side, we're sitting around a budget table trying to control expenses for the city of Brandon so that we can disperse those particular fees in amongst all the other pieces that we have of the puzzle. So that also includes recreation facilities to keep the kids busy and off the street, and we've got youth centers, we've got the sportsplex swimming areas and everything else like that too. So it is a more than one thing that we're going to have that we're going to be working on, whether it's got to be a multi-prong approach in order to do this. If we keep our kids busy, we keep them in soccer, we keep them in baseball, we keep them involved in our community, we have to make sure that we can fund everything at the same time. So when we do this, we're making sure what we're doing is we're just changing the allocation. We're just saying that we don't have the money that we did have, or we're going to have to charge somebody or increase somebody's taxes in order to move this in. So the one thing we have said, and I said before, if we're going to make a mistake, what's the worst case scenario on this one? Well, we're going to cost the taxpayers some money to support this initiative. But also, at the same time, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to put a couple more bodies on the street, which the downside of that is very small. So again, I will not be supporting the motion as far as being able to reduce their budget, but I do want everyone to understand that this is a conscious decision that we're making to increase taxation for the ratepayers of Brandon, Manitoba in order to support this initiative. This is not free. It's something that we're all going to pay a little chunk of in order to see if we can bite this and get a little jump on it. Okay, so.
Thank you. I have other hands up. It would be allowing the mover to close, but I do want to add a closing comment of my own that not just about this, but really of the whole budget and the other 54 items that we have. I always view it as a council setting priorities for our community and setting priorities for our taxpayers, not then to say that we necessarily raise taxes by this, $177,000 to do this initiative. In my own personal point of view, I've lots of us come up with sort of other cuts that allow us to do other things. Like we've got lots of adds and subtracts in here, and sometimes then the subtracts allow us to do the adds. And I mean, that's our job, is we're here to represent the pulse of our community and add and subtract where we feel that the public would want us to. So with that, I didn't have any other hands up, so I'd allow the mover to close, who's sat there very patiently and taking this all in. So, Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I am glad that we do get to have a good discussion. Obviously, we support our police services to the tune of more than anything in the city. We're 100% behind them. I've always been 100% behind them. I guess one of the things I bring this up for, and I know we can't change much, I always look at the police service and fire department as essentially if we were just the school board, that's what we'd have. That would be our budget, and we would be pretty much as effective as a school board because we don't do anything there. It's like we have a team, a hockey team. I'm going to talk to my hockey guys across the street here. We got a hockey team that the highest paid players, we give them about 3 to 4% increase every year, but we only charge the ticket price. We only go up about 1% every year. Well, somewhere along the line, you can't pay those players. So that's just sort of my thought. So to quote Jerry Maguire, to the unions, help me help you. Come in closer to what we can manage for the citizens. Otherwise, we're going to have to one day start saying, you know what, here's the new union contract, 3.5%, taxes, 3.5%. That's that. Deal with it. Suddenly, the Johnnies of the world might say, oh, well, that's pretty high. Well, no, it's over $400,000 this year, increase in this budget just simply based on the fact that the union contract goes up that much. Next year it'll be higher. Next year it'll be higher. Nobody questions the job that people do. And we support them 100%. Absolutely. Like the chief can call on me anytime for anything, and I will support those guys 100%, guys and girls. I know a couple of them will come after me. The team, 100%. Somewhere along the line, though, the chickens come home to roost. And we're fortunate because we're not the school board. 80-90% of our budget isn't just salaries. We've got all these other departments we can cut from, we can cut costs, we can try to increase revenues through different aspects, but it doesn't work. And it's our highest paid people in our system, and it's gone straight up for almost 20 years now. So they need to start working with us, which means working with the community to make it sustainable. We need more people. Go up a little less, you can add more people. That's all it is. I appreciate the discussion, and I do want to comment that the police board, I thought, did a very good job with their budget this year. They addressed a lot of the things that we've talked about at this table. So, thank you, and
I'm going to call for the question on the amendment, and I will remind that the recorded vote has been requested, so we'll do so. All those in favor of the motion? Councillor Fawcett. All those opposed? All remaining members. Thank you very much.
So that's recorded with, but no dialogue, right? So it just looks like I opposed the police budget, but no discussion. So good. I'm glad that was recorded.
Better hope there's no break-in.
Make sure when you're looking back at that,
Your truck is
mental notes. Yeah.
Better hope there's no break-in at your place.
Well, yeah, I don't think that it means anything. I think
It doesn't mean anything at all.
your sentiments are well noted. So, with respect to, again, respecting our staff, I think the only thing, and I might go to Councillor Patterson here, if it's grouped under protective services, the sort of commitment to crystal meth wording, I don't know if it's going to be budget or related, whether something.
I've got it written if we want to do it now.
Okay, go ahead.
All right.
Now, I do want to say, though, that what we're dealing with, we have a motion on the floor that's the passage of the budget. We're entertaining amendments to the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I got it.
All right.
I think I did.
Let's have
All
it.
right.
Yep.
So, whereas Brandon City Council recognizes the use of crystal methamphetamine is a crisis in our community, and the City of Brandon is only one, but a necessary piece in tackling this problem in a coordinated effort, along with other orders of government, community organizations, and families. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council direct administration to continue with their current efforts to end this crisis, as well as actively pursue ways to combat this problem within the resources approved in this budget.
Okay. I'll allow that. Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer, wish to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a bit of rationale about why I'm bringing this forward. I've been thinking about this quite a bit over the last little while, and you know, when we face a crisis, something like a flood, we have really clear ideas, and you know, we know that we need to respond. We know we need to build a dike, and we know we need to do this. And really, the point behind this resolution is, I know there is work going on in many different parts of the city corporation on this crisis, but I do want to put it on people's heads. I want for this budget year, administration and city staff to know that this is kind of like a flood. This is where we need to think about how we can shift resources. If there's, you know, in the community development budget, like if there's an opportunity to come up, how do we marshal it properly? So that's the whole point of it, and this also allows us to make further decisions as we debate throughout the day. So I just would really appreciate if my colleagues would support this general policy direction.
Very good. Seconder, wish to speak? Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to add that, you know, when asking administration to help us deal with this issue of crystal meth in our community, we've also done a bit of background, and council are aware that we've seen increases from our EMS staff too in dealing with intervention of people that are overdosing. We've seen from our citizens when they're experiencing property crimes for people wanting to, you know, turn quick theft into to buying crystal meth. So this motion that Councillor Patterson brings forward is our commitment to realizing that we do have a problem in the community, and I agree with Councillor Desjardins that it is a community problem that we have to look beyond to recognize it is a social issue too, dealing with the issues around the people that are seeking drugs in their lives, that we have to deal with, you know, the poverty issues too around housing and jobs and everything else too is part of the problem. So it is an all-encompassing social issue that this council, when they support this motion, are committed to working a little closer on the social issues around this problem.
Thank you. Didn't have any other hands up. I would just kind of want to characterize that this is maybe a little unusual motion with respect to budget implication, but I think that should it pass, it's just a clarifying signal from City Council to administration that City Council is firmly behind efforts that would support ending addiction, preventing it from in the first place, and the like, and so that there's no confusion. Council is behind any efforts that within the existing budget, every department that council is firmly behind administration's ability to provide efforts and within their activities throughout the year. So I think it's appropriate, and naturally I'll be supporting it. Any further discussion? Mover need to close?
I just do want to, in closing, thank the family members that have been sharing their really painful experiences publicly to make sure that we become aware of this issue and the community becomes aware of this issue. And I also want to acknowledge those organizations that are predominantly in downtown Brandon that work with folks that are dealing with these addictions. They've really had to step up and provide additional supports. So in closing, I do want to acknowledge those two groups.
Very good. I'm going to call for the question then on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And Mr. Hammond, unless I missed something, or Val, those are all of the potential amendments that would affect the police service? Sorry? I got them grouped into the categories here, but all of you that made motions, can any of the rest of you recall making anything?
There was a reserve one.
Okay.
Wasn't there?
Maybe there was me.
For fire,
Go ahead.
Maybe we can talk about the ambassador program right now, and I might get Chief Balkan to come up and maybe have discuss how that might improve or benefit policing and collaboration with downtown.
I'm fine with that. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Jarley, and make the motion.
And before we do that, I'd like
into?
to make a friendly amendment to that and reduce it from 50 to 30,000.
You just have to move it as a $30,000.
30?
Yeah. Go ahead and make the motion. So you're moving the initiation of a downtown ambassador program at a cost of $30,000. Seconder for that, please. Councillor Parker. Mover wish to speak. You can kind of give us your vision, then we can count up the chief after that.
So, through your worship, we've been discussing ways in which we just passed a resolution on dealing with crystal meth and addiction, and we know that we can put money into enforcement, but another area in which we actually do have some say is in prevention and in keeping our streets safer and friendlier. In our downtown, we've lost businesses recently because of the sense that our streets aren't as safe as they should be. There are, I believe, a number of calls to service that BPS handles that might be addressed by piloting an ambassador program. Not only that, the ambassadors would very likely be collaborating and working in partnership with BPS, dealing with panhandling, open, like public intoxication, but also just being a friendly presence in the downtown, keeping the streets cleaner, safer. But I would like to hear what Chief Balkan has to say on this and whether or not he thinks that this would be complementary to the efforts of BPS in keeping our streets safer and friendlier in the downtown.
Before I find to do that, but maybe it might even help him and the rest of us in terms of if you've sussed out kind of what this looks like what does 30,000 do? This is how many people for what season, how many days, how many hours? I don't know if you've kind of...
I think it would be 2 people, two ambassadors, working Monday through Friday in the day to help with when stores are open. Likely for, starting maybe in the spring and then running it into the fall. And then and then at the end of this, I'm assuming this would be a pilot, so this is something that we would get a report back on, and we would take a look to see if the calls to service were reduced, if we'd get a survey from downtown residents and downtown business owners to see if this was a benefit to the community. We would want to report back to hear that this was well received and that it's something that we might want to continue moving forward.
Councilor Reggio?
Chris, can I just get some clarification? When I think of an ambassador program, I think of people welcoming people to come downtown and shop. Welcome to the, but from what you're saying, it sounds more like a cadet program.
Well, through your worship, downtown ambassadors do a number of things in different communities, one of which might be welcoming people to the downtown. But some of them will walk with somebody into a business, right? Show them where parking is, be eyes and ears if there is public intoxication or panhandling going on. They can get people to move along. If there's any situations that are arising, they can be in contact with BPS. It takes the load off of the downtown businesses to do that because they get exhausted doing that. They're not sure if they should be the ones making the calls. So there is a coordinated effort between downtown ambassadors in every community and the police services within those communities. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a community that have implemented a downtown ambassador program that haven't seen the merits and the benefit of that, and they end up keeping those things going because it really does improve the safety, the cleanliness, the friendliness of a downtown. And it's something that's part of our plan as a city. I think that we had a strategic plan that we did in 2014 to keep to keep the downtown as a main priority, and this is one of the ways in which we can demonstrate that we are still considering the downtown as a very important part of our city.
If I may, just as a quick follow-up, I heard a comment from someone, perhaps this money could be put towards the Bear Clan, or are we looking at two separate entities here? Two separate items?
Well, I think for now, I think the Bear Clan would be, and why I have another one for 5,000 for the Bear Clan, is that they do a lot of stuff in the evenings after hours. They do they go around, they help the homeless, and this is and it would be in concert with what they do. But the Bear Clan volunteer efforts would be outside of this. But they also could be working alongside the Bear Clan as well too. And there's also an opportunity here to partner with mental health services, with housing outreach workers, with Samaritan House. So this really could, I think it's demonstrating that not only do we want to address the enforcement of drugs and the criminal activity, we want to try and prevent those things from happening. And I think that this is an important piece of that puzzle.
Okay. Now, I stepped out of line a little bit here. I didn't allow the seconder to speak, which is Councillor Parker, so I'll come back to you.
I just want to say that I would support Chris fully on this. Just maybe we can ask that the appropriate departments look for funding, if this is a seasonal type of employee thing and there is federal funding or something available, that we might explore that option a little bit to help offset those costs or enhance the program a little bit more, but I think overall it's a pretty good initiative and something we could look at supporting.
Okay, so the mover did ask if we could have the chief come up, and then I sort of circumvented that. I'm glad you did flesh that out a little better. So if you don't mind coming up, Chief, and hopefully you've got the gist of what Councillor Desjardins is presenting, and then you can provide your impressions of it, I guess. I gather, this may be the first year hearing of it, but you may have had other discussions over the years, so go ahead.
Your Worship, to Councillor Desjardins, I would be in support of a program such as this, partnering with the police service. We presently partner with a number of volunteer agencies or not-for-profit or other areas that would help us in our movement to keep this city safe. The Bear Clan comes to mind, COPP, we've got neighborhood watch programs and the like. So anything that we can do to help this community and particularly our historic district downtown area where we've seen an increase in some of these issues. Yes, I would have to see how this flushed out and who these people reported to, negotiations being done if they're part of the police service. The negotiations would have to be done through our police association and the city to look at what their remuneration would be. But as far as working with them, yes, that's definitely something that I would be in favor of. We'd also have to look at the fact that they would not have any sort of police authority or jurisdictions, and we'd have to make sure 100% that their safety is preserved. Because a lot of times dealing with situations, some of them that you mentioned, can become dynamic in nature, and I just want to make sure that these people are as safe as possible.
Thank you. And through your worship, that's I'm in total agreement with everything you said. And I think that if we were to start this in May or June, this gives us enough time to flush that out on what that relationship would look like, what kind of training might be involved. And I know all those other volunteer organizations are very important. The unfortunate thing is most of those people work during the day. So this is an added piece of that puzzle. This would be ambassadors that are working Monday through Friday in the afternoons, in the mornings, potentially, in complement to those organizations that do great service to our community but are doing it after hours on their own time.
Again, I've got Councillor Harwood with your hand up next.
Yep, through your worship to the chief. Is the service doing foot patrols downtown, chief, currently?
Your worship to Councillor Harwood, we have a downtown program that we put together. We do our foot patrols and bike patrols as well as vehicle patrols or static patrols, having vehicles park and members walk. That is primarily in the summer months. We bring that program because our school resource officers, once they're done the school portion, we reassign them to this initiative in the summer. It's been quite effective. This year actually was the first year that I didn't have any direct calls for service from businesses in the area. Matter of fact, lots of support letters and lots of support emails for it. So it is something that visibility and perception raises for the safety and the visibility of police and enforcement.
Thank you.
Councillor Cullen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a problem with the concept. In fact, I would like to see it vetted out, through the police board, through proper channels, and go back through. I am a little hesitant at this moment just because it's the first time I've heard of it, so therefore I don't like to just, at this point, in this late hours, just to jump in and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We do have the bike patrol, the BCOP, Citizens on Patrol that I've had the opportunity to sit in for, and I think they all have merit. I just think at this point in time that it needs to go through the police board. They're the ones that are structuring this piece. I would probably be supportive in any type of additional services, to do that, but I think it needs to go through. I think it's premature right now to be adding the structure without going through the police board and without vetting it properly. So,
I'm going to interject that it occurs to me that if it were to pass, and I don't disagree with Councillor Cullen, these are difficult when they sort of arrive on budget day, and all due respect to Councillor Desjardins' heart is in the right place, and it's got a great deal of merit, and I'm leaning towards supporting it. But I think that if it were to pass, we would then be asking our collective administration, including the police service, police board, and the balance of our administration, to probably report back to council in terms of how it would be best implemented. Like the chief indicated before, that there could be some cumbersome aspects of just fully adding it to the police services responsibility, and potential considerations with the collective agreement. It might be under a different department, maybe community services, or again, I think that if it were to pass, then we would ask our administration to come back with, how it could best work, so that it provides the best utility for the funds allocated. So that would be my suggestion, that let's not presume that it's under the police board's jurisdiction or the police chief's jurisdiction right off the bat. Maybe it ends up there, but I think that we would need to give administration time to just sort of properly suss that out for us. Councillor Reggio?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to echo what you and Councillor Cullen said. I would support this with a caveat that a meeting be held between concerned parties, the Downtown Development Corporation, the police service, maybe a representative from the city, to flesh this out. And unless there's a plan developed, the caveat would be the funds are not released. So we set the money aside so that they don't have to come to us later in the year to request some funding, and we'd have to look for it. But we can set the money aside on the proviso that we'll see a plan, we'll see what the police service has to say, the Downtown Development Corporation. They might not agree with this. So let's get the parties interested first to talk about it, see if there's support for it, and then if there is, we've got the plan, we can release the funds.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate approach. We do that with other things. There'll be stuff that's passed in the budget today that ends up not being able to proceed,
So can I make an amendment, a friendly amendment that...
No such thing as a friendly amendment.
Okay, I'll make an amendment that $30,000 be set aside, but the funds will not be released until a plan is presented to council for its approval. Is that okay with you, Chris?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so the amendment is, because the motion's already on the floor at the $30,000, the amendment to the amendment would be something to the effect that funds not released until a suitable plan comes back to council.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Harwood? Discussion on that? I think it's been kind of thrown out, the reason for that, but I'll take discussion. Councillor Barry?
No discussion, just a question. So either way, we're spending $30,000? Regardless what motion, either way, we're spending $30,000?
Yeah.
Well, so what's the purpose of the amending motion then? Let's just deal with it and let's go.
Well, I think that personally that it's valid.
We're spending $30,000 regardless.
But this is putting a condition that they can spend the money tomorrow.
We've talked about this for half an hour. We're going to be here till tomorrow. Come on.
Well, the amendment to the amendment is valid, so we can discuss it or not.
Mm-hmm.
No further discussion. I'm going to call the question on the amendment to the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Back to the amendment as amended. Any further discussion on the proposal by Councillor Desjardins? Whoever wish to close? No. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Chief. And now we're pretty comfortable that not any other provisions that affect the police service at the moment. Very good. I'm going to sort of unilaterally move on to fleet related. Mr. Appel has been here for a while, and administration's going to have to help me pick out those things that affect fleet. I have a couple. I don't necessarily need get the ball rolling. I'm moving that we reduce equipment and machinery reserve appropriations by $200,000. Seconder will speak to it. Seconder, please.
Second that.
Councilor Reggio. And to refer council to 25 of the reserve section. And in sort of full disclosure, I truly believe our fleet department does a fabulous job, and they've done a great deal of improvements to our whole process, and interface with all of the departments on all of our vehicle and equipment needs and so on and so forth. So this is certainly no reflection at all on the job they're doing, but I do look at some of these reserves. So when you look at the machinery and equipment reserve, it's a very, very large, important part of our operations. Obviously, if the budget were to pass as it is, we're going to contribute almost $3 million. That's sprinkled through various departments in the city. End the year with almost a $4 million balance. You can see it stretching forward. The lowest that the balance ever gets is just under $3 million there in 2021. It gets as high as almost $9 million in 2025. So to me, it's a very healthy reserve, and we don't necessarily need to populate it quite as heavily as we have. So my motion is certainly just removing $200,000 from appropriations, and administration would be tasked to just sort of pro rata sprinkle that across all departments to the various cost centers. That's my motion. Seconder wish to speak, Councilor Reggio?
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Any other discussion? Mover doesn't need to close, so I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Others can join in if you want, but I want to have a similar motion about I'm going to move that we reduce the fire vehicle reserve appropriation by $50,000. Again, in the reserve section, I'll refer you to page 18. Sort of a similar circumstance. Again, we want to be well equipped and certainly saving up. I do look at these things stretched out over a long period of time. You'll see on the fire vehicles reserve, you'll notice, for example, we're saving for a very big expenditure in 2021 of that $1.75 million is primarily the replacement of the Quint that will occur then. So, we do take a little bit of a dip, then we start building, quite a healthy number again. I do know, because I've inquired, that, again, way out, we need a total of about $1.8 million to replace 2 pumpers in the years of 2032 and 2034. But again, if we continue to appropriate as we are, we should have no difficulty in having that significant amount of money. Again, we're talking 2032 is 14 years from now yet. So this is stretched way out. So again, the reducing the capital appropriation by $50,000, I don't believe will have any material effect on the health of this reserve at all. So I think I moved that and then spoke to it without getting a seconder. Sorry, Councillor Parker. Mover has already spoken. I apologize for that. Seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any discussion? Councillor Fawcett?
Yes, through Your Worship, just to note, I'm not opposed to this by any stretch, but these are sort of examples of how we try to keep a budget in check when we don't manage salaries. We've got room to take $200,000 here, $100,000 there, and when we don't address sort of our union stuff, this is how we do it. And eventually, we're going to get tight on these things. So, but I'm here right now with you.
Okay. Now, I'm being a little cavalier. because I have a great deal of respect for our administration, and, you know, we passed it. My last one, I didn't allow anybody to come forward to challenge it, but I would, you know, certainly not disrespect our administration. But, you know, if there's any red flag on these sorts of things, I'd be glad to hear it. So I'm not sure if either the fleet manager or the fire service has, in this particular case, have any objection that they would like us to know about. As I say, any red flags, certainly we don't want to put ourselves in jeopardy. And I apologize, Mr. Pelt, that I didn't give you that opportunity on the machinery one. Hopefully there wasn't a red flag on that one. Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship. Just one more thing of note, that on top of this, prior to getting to budget day, we did have management do a scrub of $500,000 of reserves. So that's already been removed from what we did. So
yeah,
just of note.
Glad you said that, and I will say that as a result of that, I had a lot less cards to play personally. They done a good job of that, but there were still a few crumbs here and there. Not seeing any further hands for discussion. I'd like to call a question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Help me here if there's other fleet-related items in here that...
I think that was it.
There are, okay, the transit ones are not related to equipment. Okay, so we're pretty well covered in fleet. So thanks for coming, Daryl, and you can go about your day. And I'm kind of going by the order of when people showed up. Now, Jason showed up long ago. Is he still here? I can't see him. Oh, there he is. Okay. So again, Jason from IT has been here a little while. So let's move on to the IT-related motions, if we could. Somebody can help me out with whoever made some.
Fleet radio, is that the only one that's really IT?
I think Councillor Parker had a couple.
Yeah.
Where'd they go?
Technology reserve.
They're on your
Yeah.
monitor, your worship.
Technology reserve and eliminate fleet radio project.
Listen to the page numbers there.
Very last page.
Grouping, where are they under?
Last one in reserve, and second one in capital.
Reserves. Councillor Parker, you want to go ahead, take your pick.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the page, Your Worship, so I can have people refer to that. I can't remember offhand.
It's up on the
40,
screen.
thank you.
40.
Yep.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to put forward a motion that we push the capital request of $450,000 for the radio network to 2020.
Point of order, did I mishear the original motion? Was that your intent with the original motion, was to postpone it as opposed to eliminate it?
Well, yes. We're going to need it at some point, but I don't think we need it initially, I guess is my feeling, so.
Okay, so the motion is to, in the capital plan, to move the FleetNet radio project to 2020. And is there a seconder for that? Barry? Whoever wish to speak. And again, Mr. Koleski is here that can speak to the project and answer questions if there are some. Go ahead, Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Richard. I just, personally, I feel that, I think I expressed the sentiment yesterday, I think we're in a situation where we need to have budgets as opposed to nice to have budgets, and we're communicating quite nicely right now, I believe. I know that there is a payback, although my math didn't work out quite that there was a 4 or 5 year payback, but in my opinion, $450,000 to save $40,000 a year for the next couple of years doesn't make good sense in this particular climate when funding is so go up in the air from different levels. So I just think that it's more prudent of us to put that off and utilize what we have until we're in a better position to earn $50,000. That equates to 1% on someone's property tax, just for those keeping score. So it is a significant chunk of change. Now, we're not going to save that much this year. It will stay and build the reserve. And so my second motion will address what we'll save this year relative to that.
Very good. Seconder wish to speak, Councillor Berry?
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. And I have Councillors Patterson and Cullen up next. And again, remind everyone that Jason's here if there's questions, but Councillor Patterson is next.
Yeah, I do have two questions. So my first one, Dean or Val.
Questions of Jason?
One of Jason, yeah. My first one's for Dean and Val, though. I just want to confirm that this appropriation is all coming from reserve? That there's nothing coming from general revenue?
Yeah, so the 450 is coming out of the technology reserve.
Right. So even if we eliminate it, that does not impact the mill rate?
That's correct.
Okay. So my second question, and this is to Jason, so I'll just... my second question is, what are the chances that this $450,000 expenditure will be more than $450,000 when we go to make it in 2020?
Through your worship to the councillor, in my opinion, I think the 450 is a solid number. If you pushed it out, there is a chance that might have to spend more money. I mean, these numbers that we got through the study that we did last year, they projected it, as if we were going to be building this year, right? They didn't project for.
Okay, and are you done, Councillor Patterson?
Well, I don't know. Can I speak after asking questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to support this. I think my mind would be changed if this was all coming out of general revenue, but I don't like taking the risk on something so big of $450,000. I don't want to risk that being $500,000 in 2020.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cullen next.
Mr. Worship, through you to Jason. You had mentioned in your conversations yesterday that there was the reason why you were taking this initiative is because you had projected increased costs in the very near future. So therefore, I'm trying to sort of fish for by delaying this, what increased costs would we be triggering or signing contracts over the next few years that would hold us to that position, putting us in a worse position. So if you could maybe explain that.
Yes, so through your worship to Councillor Cullen, the costs per year right now annually per radio is $480. That's the annual cost.
Right.
Under our proposed solution, we're estimating it will drop down to $70. Now, there is some licensing costs that do occur with the solution. There's about $10,000 take. So, moving to the new network, if we were to continue just renting airtime and joined the new Places FleetNet, there would be roughly about $100,000 to flash all the radios and get it up to the whatever new standard. I mean, the province is still currently working on that.
Okay.
Springboard from that, can I just get you to clarify though, and this shows a cumbersome part of budgets that administration are putting forward a complete plan. So it'd be like if you pass this capital, this is the operating, and vice versa. So Jason and I realize that, we're already at the 20th of January and you'd have to tender for the radios and whatnot, so this wouldn't involve the whole year worth. But is your operating budget, or the operating budgets of various departments that use these radios, and predicated on the overall financial plan? In other words, the notion that the capital proceeded with the $450,000, and therefore we're going to enjoy the operating savings at some point in the year. So, and I guess what I'm getting at, if we pass this motion, do we then automatically have to amend the operating side because it goes back up?
Interesting.
Approve this, in theory, your operating should go down because we're not only using that each department has a fleet net. Follow me?
We're currently paying fleet.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, the operating will go up. Because this
He's
presumes.
covering the cost.
Okay, we'll let these guys.
Yeah.
Well, hi, sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, we were just chatting there for a second. So, yes, you're partly right, Your Worship, in that this year we did not adjust for those savings from the individual departments, the parks, operations, transit. They would start, even though they would start seeing the benefits as soon as the system would go live, which we're, all things considered, it would probably go live in the late fall of this year. So there would be a little bit of surplus savings, just since we don't 100% know when it would start in the fall. It would be hard to kind of project that. You wouldn't want to budget for the instant savings to start in September.
That's good to know. So it doesn't impact this
No.
year's operating
No.
in terms of the savings. Good. And Councillor Harwood next.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm not going to support this motion because, the money is available money's available in the reserve. And it just makes no sense to me as to why we wouldn't, proceed with this project now, because to do the other, we're kicking it down the road 2 years, maybe 3 years. We have the funds to do it, and it would make sense to do it this year, and then it's upgraded and it's all taken care of.
And I think I had Councillor Parker with his hand up again.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted us to really talk about this, but I think that with no impact on operating budgets for this year and those savings starting to be reflected for 2019, I could easily be convinced to move it just to 2019. And recognizing, of course, as Councillor Patterson said, it's not going to reduce the mill rate this year, but we can reduce the appropriations, which is what I'm talking about next, I guess. So, and maybe we can accomplish that anyway. So I just, as far as the cost on technology goes, I think the trend is usually that they go down, not up. Cost of big screen TVs isn't going up every year, it's going the other way, and I would assume most technology follows that. So the fear of this cost of this project going up over a year or two, it never entered my mind. So, and I suspect the operating costs or the licensing fees, in all likelihood, probably aren't going to go up if we sign up next year or a year. I think it's something that we can push off and save the $150,000 in appropriations, which is a separate motion, but that's kind of where I'm sitting.
Okay, Councillor Reggio.
Thank you. Jason, you probably answered this yesterday, and I'm trying to think back because we have so much information. A radio network needs a base, needs someone to monitor it, someone to look after it. You said we do have someone on staff right now. We won't be hiring another body to look after this radio network?
Your Worship, to Councilor Reggio, yes. Through one of the things we looked at during the study was how much impact staff timing-wise this would have, how much extra care and feeding, and there will be some. However, in other efficiencies that we've gained, yes, we're not hiring any extra staff for this. This will just be incorporated to some of the efficiencies that helped us. We've been able to free up a little bit of time. That time we're going to use for this.
So when we purchase these radios, if we purchase them, there's an issue with them. Do they get sent back to the manufacturer for repair, or is there someone on staff right now who is trained in fixing radios?
For Your Worship, to Councillor, yes. If they were defective, we would send them back on warranty. What Pete would be doing in the way of care and feeding would be if there was, say, interference in connection issues or configuration issues with the base and whatnot. So, yes, there will be work, but we're going to absorb it. We're not hiring new staff for this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, City Manager, just want to add.
To add, Your Worship, through to Council, Jason, jump in here if I'm incorrect. Currently, with the radios we have, we are responsible for maintenance and repairs now, correct? So there is a cost. If a radio goes down, we're taking that cost ourselves. So whether we own the radio or the service provider is irrelevant. We are responsible for the ownership of the radio. If it doesn't work, we have to pay for it, correct?
Your Worship, to the City Manager, yes, it's because the current system is all off warranty. There's back on warranty. So we usually have to absorb the cost.
Yes.
Most times it's not like a computer that you can fix. It's done. It's done. It's
right.
I find a new one on eBay.
Councillor Cullen?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to Jason. So again, just to make sure that I understand what we got old technology that's pretty much hit the end of its life. We have a new contract that's coming through that it's a service contract, not just buying technology, right? Service contract, so that means it's, and everything I've looked at here, all our service contracts are going this way. They're not going this way. So, and we're going to be, once we've spent this money from the reserve, we're going from 480 per radio down to 70 basically. So, and the money's coming out of the reserve, so therefore you have done your due diligence right now. You have budgeted this from our reserve, saying this is where you think we should be going. And so you're ready to kind of do this, right?
Through your Worship, to the Councillor, yes. A note on the contract is we haven't been told how much it's going up, but we have been told it's going to go up significantly. So that 480 is just what we're paying right now. Okay. 480 per radio. It's rumored to be upwards of 50%. So all these numbers that we've been talking about are all based on just what are we currently paying. We are going to be paying more. We don't know what that is, so we, guesstimate. We just want current rates.
It's, again, I'll probably be voting against this motion, and just the reason being is that we kind of challenge our administration staff to come up with ways of saving us money and doing things that are a little better, and we're always telling them, look, do it in-house versus, jobbing it out and all those kind of things. So I think this kind of falls into that category. I respect Councillor Parker seeing the big number there and being able to push it out, but I don't see the advantage of pushing it out at this point. So maybe we should take a look at this and fly it up the flagpole and see what you can do with it.
Val, you had something to add?
If I may, I just wanted to note that we got approximately 160 radios. So if we're saving $410 per radio, that's $65,600 per year in just operating costs. Not even to mention what we're paying for repairs and maintenance right now, because they're not on warranty. So for the first few years of the new ones, they will be on warranty, so there'll be those additional savings should we require repairs and maintenance.
But
and I'd like to add that number, this proposal, through your worship to council, to put your mind at ease a little more perhaps, we want to be ready. We know the prices are going up. If we do this now, we're done. If we don't do it now and the prices go up, we're on the hook for a 50% increase that we're going to have to do because we don't have any other communication system. And the last thing I'm going to say is we're paying for a service that is far much more than what we need right now. That's why we can go from $480 a radio down to $70. Our operations guys that are running the graders and running the sanitation trucks and running the loader don't need to be tied into fire and police, but we're paying for that service. So in my mind, that is a service which is completely over and above what we need. But at the day, that was the only options we had 20 years ago when we had FleetNet. And unfortunately, the FleetNet costs are going up. Administration has done their homework looking for efficiencies. And yes, there is an upfront cost, but down the road savings is huge. So I just wanted to provide that for council. The service is more than what we need, and we don't want to pay for it anymore.
Call for the question, please.
Very good. We'll call for the question then. All those in favor of pushing the FleetNet radio project out to 2020, all those in favor? Opposed? That's defeated. Thank you. And
That was just a red herring anyway.
the other project, Councillor Parker?
Yes, I would just make an amendment that we reduce the appropriations for IT by $150,000. And I guess that's it. I guess we'll need a seconder in order to move on.
You figure that we'll need a seconder and then we'll let them speak. Councillor Reggio? Go ahead, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. There may or may not be any appetite for this. The reserve is in a reasonable position. I think there is a saving that can be had in 2018's expenditures. The radios clearly wasn't one of them. However, the need for the fiber optic extension down to the transit shed, I don't know what the right word is, the downtown, to provide connectivity. I'm not sure who's gaining the benefit from that and whether that's worth $170,000. So if Jason may want to explain that a little bit further.
Did somebody second that?
Oh.
Official good morning, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Parker, through the PTIF funding, as you know, we are going to amalgamate the two functions that are currently operating downtown for transit, the information booth, which is at 8th and Rosser, and the white comfort station, we ironically call it, that currently doesn't have any connectivity. The info center booth itself does have some connectivity, and I would leave the technical side of that to Jason to explain how. But how that functions and connects to the city network will not be possible when we move to the new building. So we're building a brand new building, merging the two functions together, and we are in need of running fiber to that building in order to connect to the city infrastructure.
Okay. Going back to, so the seconder was Councillor Reggio. I'll give you the floor.
Not at this moment.
Okay, and Councillor Patterson, hands up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to amend the motion to make the reduction $75,000.
Seconder, please. Councillor Berry, who wishes to speak.
Yes, Your Worship, just looking at the reserve account moving forward, a full reduction of 150, including, the expenditures outlined this year, will put the reserve in a projected deficit position. So I think that just reducing this year's appropriation by $75,000 will ensure that, other planned things such as upgrading servers and purchasing the appropriate software can continue on.
Seconder wishes to speak.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Further discussion on the amendment? None. We'll call for the question on the amendment to the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Back to the motion as amended. Any speakers? Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. The one question I have on this particular item we were talking about there, the fiber optic line, is all our connections are through city-owned buildings right now?
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett. Yes, around the city.
But the airport,
yes.
Sportsplex, Fire Hall.
Fire Hall. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So the one that we're talking about here, this short one, like it would eventually be connected to a new building, city-owned building? But currently, is it tied into the town center building? Is that the one? How does that work? I just out of curiosity.
Sorry, through your worship to Councillor Fawcett. There is a shared, it's a spur. It's not part of the ring, but that is Prairie Mountain Hall now. That's there. That goes into we do not go into town center. So we'd have to go around it, but
I'm just thinking,
there's none of our fiber in there.
yeah, I'm just wanting to, we seem to have made all these efforts to make sure that we kind of keep ourselves securely in city buildings and that.
Through your worship, just to add, so the current info center actually has a wireless link. It doesn't go through the town center, and it bounces right to the sportsplex, which means it can go right straight down, was it 8th Street there or whatever,
Yes.
and hit it. The new building is off down the hill farther to the side. So that's how that building is on our dedicated network. We have nothing else in that area. We have tried to keep everything on our own private network because it's better for security, better for throughput, future needs. This would be a spur going from the A.R. McDermott building down to this new transit building, which is halfway down the hill between some other buildings. So we can't use a wireless link. If we could have used a wireless link, we would have. But this will give us, it's a long-term asset, 50 plus years, just like the rest of our fiber. It allows Carla to have multiple offices in there, which she wants. It allows us to add the camera system in that we would need, our VoIP system. So it's a great long-term asset, just like our other fiber has been.
And it would go into this little warming house or whatever they're calling it is city-owned.
Yes, and I should mention too that, as Todd mentioned, the current info station that has the wireless point-to-point is extremely poor right now. It can only hold with moving it down towards the bus depot there, connectivity is far worse. We can't connect anything, let alone add anything to it. It's just not reliable in that location, as Todd said. The line of sight is not there.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to see that we're kind of ourselves linked together, if that was our objective.
Lost track of hands. Any other speakers? Councillor Jarley?
Thank you, through your worship. I'm going to vote against this, large part because they've already reduced the appropriation this year. They're appropriating 250 over the next many years. This year they've dropped it down to 150, so I think that they've already done their best to keep the reserve appropriation in line and consider taxpayers' rate increase this year. So I'm going to vote against this one for this reserve.
Thank you. I'll chime in. We're getting kind of splitting hairs a little bit. I consider myself a wee bit of a reserve hawk. You could ask Val, and when I see even without this motion, we're going to be in a deficit position in 2021, which is only sort of 3 years out. This 75 reduction would put us even further in the ditch, and those ones I tend not to touch. Again, I appreciate all councillors' efforts to find savings anywhere we can. Some of them are very doable and valid. This one, I think, just puts us, we're really going to put some future council in position of having to jack up more money to get to where we're going to be. So fortunately, I won't be able to support this one. Carla?
Your Worship, if I may just add something that I think needs to be considered on the PTIF application when I first applied for that project. It's based on outcome indicators, and one of them is improved functionality and, having a look at what those targets are that we're going to meet. And it was amalgamating the two functions and leaving the info center piece where it is, walking away from that building that is owned by the town center. If we don't do this fiber optic line to connect, she won't be able to move. She'll have to stay in the info center, and that means we would be in violation of the outcomes as we applied for under the project, which could jeopardize that funding. So I believe that's a component that really needs to be evaluated as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And with all due respect, we don't really have a motion on the floor to do anything with that fiber optic unless it's coming up by somebody else. We're really only just making the appropriation and taking the reserve down, and everything else would stand unless another motion comes. Any further discussion on this reduction motion? Move wish to close.
Yeah, it's Your Worship, thank you. I guess the whole point was that we wasn't just reducing the appropriation, but ultimately reducing the expense that would offset that, and then the reserve would still be in a healthy position. So it's sort of tied to the need for the fiber optic. Some of the explanations that come forward since the discussion begins change, and would have been useful information to have before, probably. It might have saved us 20 minutes of discussion dealing with this. So anyway, it's time for the question.
Very good. Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? It is defeated. Now, were there any other motions that implicated IT? You recall? Very good. Thank you, Jason. Now I'm going to unilaterally go to fire. Participants here. So motions with respect to fire. I made one, although it was kind of under the fleet and fire, so I think that one's cleaned off. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you. Through your worship, I would like to see the fire budget reduced by $100,000. Let's take it out of the line that has salaries, just if you have to have a line.
Very good. A seconder, please. Councillor Desjardins. Mover wish to speak?
I do, Your Worship, and, if we want to keep it all just real quick, we can replay the police discussion that we just had, and we can have a vote, or I'll show up as the one person opposed to the fire budget, but it is exactly the same thing. If we'd have said to the taxpayers a few years ago, for the next 6 years, we're going to increase your taxes at the same rate that we give firefighters, they'd have been fighting us tooth and nail. We just need to work together better as a collective. The department itself does an exceptionally good job of trying to keep this budget in check. Like, they can't do a lot with their salaries. They're negotiated and put in there. And then they got to work with their 8% of their budget that you can only have so many pencils that you can get out of a building. You can only move around chairs so often that, I guess the message more is that as a council and as a community, the union and the city need to work together better to sort of make it more manageable in the long term. Again, we're going on 20 years of quite large increases, particularly compared to any other sector. So that's all. We can kind of jump right to the vote if we want. We've had this same discussion already.
Again, and I know that you're not alone. I think many people in the community get concerned about the cost of protective services. They are never concerned about the effectiveness and of the protective services. They do a fabulous job on both sides. There's no question about it. But both are in the sort of collective agreement environment that they're in terms of the binding arbitration, and we've seen both sides of that. And council is left really, we don't have, the fire service itself doesn't certainly have any control over it, nor do council. And the flip side of it, I think we could proudly at least say we have done other things to insulate the taxpayer from the indication that you've just had that, okay, if it's just going to go up 3 or 4% a year, then that's taxes automatically do that. We've not just thrown in the towel on that, and we've found other efficiencies and whatnot to keep cost in line for our taxpayers. So, that's the one thing we've been able to do. I always kind of take the point of view you control the things that are within your control, and the things you can't. And that's why I don't disagree with your sort of sentiment and frustration, but not a lot we can do about it unless we just provide less service. Councillor Reggio? Oh, pardon me. Seconder was Councillor Desjardins. Could speak first.
I don't need to speak on this one.
Okay, Councillor Reggio?
I'll make it short and sweet. I'm going to vote against this, but also keep in mind, we're talking about these raises the police, fire, and QP get. The bottom line is this table here approved those contracts. Back in the day, we could have voted, whoever was at here on this table could have voted against it. They didn't. We're paying for the sins of our forefathers, if you will. I'll leave it at that.
Can't recall if I saw another hand up. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do, because we do have members of the firefighter paramedic service here, I would like to hear the potential impact of reducing this, and particularly in light of the conversation we had earlier with respect to the increased use of crystal meth in our city. In my mind, I'm kind of surprised they didn't come asking us for more resources like Brandon Police, so I'd just like to hear from the service on that.
Okay, I'll ask Chief Dane to come forward and indicate, I guess Councillor Patterson says, what would be the impact of reducing 100,000 in salaries?
To Your Worship, to Councillor, if I just can ask for a moment to actually clarify what our budget is. So 89.1% of my budget is salaries. So that is a fixed cost. But at the end of the day, we have other fixed costs like our vehicles and paying for hydrants. And at the end of the day, I actually have 1.7% of my budget, or just under $165,000 of discretionary spending. Out of a $9.5 million, only $165,000 of that. So in looking at impact, when we were doing our budget this year, on my net, my budget, and just using round numbers again, my budget only goes up just under $150,000. But if you looked at the salary alone, not including salary, just the salary alone, it's $308,000. So we did. We're hearing you. We're hearing what you're saying, and we spent a lot of time scrubbing to get that down. You know, because if I just threw the wages on top of there, we'd be looking at double what the increase in my budget was. So we did our work to do that. But if we look at strictly impact, one of the things to reduce the cost is we scrubbed our overtime budgets. So if I was to do this, I'm reducing service from a 10-man minimum down to a 9-man minimum. Now, what is the impact of that? Years ago, we've done it a couple times. I think that we've been fortunate and lucky, but as I brought up when I made the presentation, one of our drivers, or one of our significant changes, is how we deliver the service. And the expectations on pre-hospital care is absolutely, I would say, almost increasing daily, but certainly monthly and yearly, and the expectations that we have to do prior to getting people to the hospital, which means that to do more services, we have to take more time doing that, which means you don't get back in service as quick as we used to. And, you know, we went from, if you were to go back 10 years ago, we'd be back in service under a half hour. Now we're like not back in service for an hour. So we're under impact. So what 9 means to taxpayers and citizens, if we have 2 rigs out, we're not doing an interior attack and house fire. We don't have 6 staff on ground to do that. So that's the impact. You can roll the dice, hope it never happens. We have done it a few times, but I think coupled with the increase that our staff have to do, that would be my impact, is reducing service and risk of not doing an interior attack on a fire in Brandon.
Okay, there's probably more questions. Speak order I have so far is Parker and Cullen.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Chief Dane. Just a couple of things showed up in here that I'm wondering if we can address, and I apologize, I maybe should have asked yesterday, but the shift differential, I noticed last year was budgeted at 30 and we spent 46, and then we're back to 32 this year for a request. I'm not sure how that.
So shift differential was originally budgeted at 32, or 30 last year, and now we're up to 32.
Correct, but the actual, by the look of this, we're actually spending 46 in 2017.
The only thing that would be is depending on the back pay. Could have been a back pay, delayed back pay, which showed up there. I'm not looking at my actual right in front of me. Last year. So then this year's projection would just be projecting on actuals, or whoa.
So if there was a back pay from a contract resolution, it would go in there?
Yeah.
And I suppose this is just a comment. I know we were busy patting Chief Balton and his crew on the back, and sometimes the firefighters take it on the chin a little bit, but I would suggest that they're fighting a new type of fire now, and dealing with some different risks that we've dealt with before there, folks, the paramedics especially, firefighter paramedics that are on calls dealing with the same issues that we've been talking about a lot with the meth and stuff. So I guess that's just a comment. It's a different world for your guys too now. It's not just police that are dealing.
Thank you. And Councillor Cullen next.
Yes, Your Worship. Again, through to Chief Dane, as we have said with the police department, we're acknowledging the fact that there is an increase in this meth problem. We understand that your first line people and paramedics are going to have to deal with this as well. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate the fact that your budget is showing that you're not asking for an increase in staffing, and that we're actually asking you to do a little more with the same. We're not asking you to cut staffing. Therefore, I'm going to be supporting you on this. Again, we understand that this is a citywide piece. This affects everybody right across the board, whether it's a youth center or whether it's the police and the paramedics. So again, I appreciate the fact that the work you've done on the budget to hold the line where it is. Okay.
Very good. Put myself in next. One thing related to this one, and probably many more, let's recall that the globally administration, so sort of all departments together, administration provided us with a $600,000 vacancy management category, the most sort of ambitious that we've ever had. That's helping to keep our number in line to start with. They're still going to have to find that throughout the year. In addition to that one, there's an additional $200,000 that the police service offered up. It's really $275,000. There was a $75,000 that they already know is going to be a vacancy, and then they've just put a global $200,000 in. So that's $800,000 collectively. The fire service, because it's certainly, if you exclude the police service, the fire service is one of the largest remaining departments. Obviously, of that $600,000 that needs to be found throughout the year that's currently unspecified, significant chunk of that's going to have to come from fire service. So we couldn't sort of ask the chief to double dip in terms of he's got to be part of the $600,000. Then we would ask him to cough up another, say in this case, 100, that he could have done by vacancy management, because he's got to have a chip in the game of that big 600 number. So I just kind of throw that in there. Then I have Councillor Parker next.
All right, thank you, Worship. We could just get some clarification. I'm not sure how this falls out, and I don't want to take a bunch of time, but we budgeted $4 million roughly last year in salaries. The actual came in, though, at $271,000 less than that, which is fine. But then we jump up by $500,000 to this year's budget number. So, Val, maybe you can step in there too and explain why such a dip last year.
If I could maybe, Your Worship, jump in for council. Generally, if you see any savings in salaries, that's a result of vacancies.
Big number, yeah, that's fine. If that's what it was.
So, and again, as I indicated yesterday, and Val helped correct me, departments such as the fire, every department head is responsible for their salaries in the sense of determining what they need for salaries and the numbers of people they have. Once that's confirmed, that goes to HR. HR enters it. It's done, like it's locked out. Nobody other than HR can go in and actually change anything. So if you see savings, that is purely a result of vacancies and not filling something. And generally what happens if there's an internal moves, those positions are protected under the contract for maybe 30 or 60 days, so it has to sit vacant. So there's your savings. And then when you do your salaries for next year, you're basing it on full complement, not trying to project unless you know if there's a vacancy in the following year and you know there's something coming up, then you can budget it, but typically that's why you'll get that spike.
Through your worship to council, actually when we just looked at our budget reviews, it was staff vacancies. We had the misfortune of having two very sick members, and so it's staff vacancies.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't have any other hands up.
One quick thing, Your Worship, through the council, if I can, I'd love to brand So I'm going to put this plug for council's consideration. His Worship and Councillor Barry were at a function that the police put on this year for paramedics. When, not if, but when the chief does it again, if you want to see value for the money, I would encourage you to go to the fire department for that session to understand what the paramedics do, and I will guarantee you when you're done, you will see the value for the money, and we want to try to expand that. But I would just like to put that plug, because what they do, when you see it and you get to see the paramedics, the training, you get to see the value for what your services are as a resident.
I have a cordless drill that they drill right into the bone to deliver pain-killing medication, and they're happy to have any volunteer for that. Isn't that right?
A couple guys would be more than willing to use that bone gun. It's a terrifying weapon, really. But it's all for the benefit of the patient.
Not seeing any further discussion. Allow the mover to close.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. If they were to choose a volunteer, who do you think they might want to?
All ideas.
But the point made is, as always, we have an exceptionally good department. There's been drastic changes to it over the years. It does an awful lot of work. We're very well served by it. That isn't the point that I'm always trying to make. Chief Dane and his team do as good a job as they can do on their budget. On a number of occasions over the years I've been here, Chief Dane has sort of, I guess, taken one for the team and actually reduced his budget at budget. That's not easy to do. I'm as part of the audit and finance group, I do see, a lot of our vacancies come and go, and the bigger departments, police and fire, have lots in there. We always know there's some room. Now, that being said, usually at budget we'll bring those things here, but they were put in prior to budget this year, so they're in there. And yesterday we spoke to that. You'll likely see some of those. So indirectly, you do probably have some kind of cut coming because of the global vacancy piece that's going to be in there. But it does come down to, we always say, well, you can pay a police, fire, whatever, like they're worth whatever, but really is there, at some point, we're going to hit a wall where we just can't pay. In all due respect, Your Worship, I do often feel quite alone on this particular topic. I'll ask for the recorded vote because I think it'll be just one again. So
You're entitled to do that. We call for the question then on the motion to reduce the fire budget by $100,000. Recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor?
Recorded with no,
Okay. Councillor Fawcett and Desjardins in favor. All those opposed?
They don't read the minutes. So,
the council, I won't read out the names and embarrass them. That is defeated. Okay, I think, was that it for fire-related items? Thank you to the chief and the two deputies for joining us this morning. And you're allowed to carry on with your day. Now, city manager recommends we move to human resources next, as the director of HR is here. So those that had HR related items, feel free to pipe up. So long, I can't even find it. Human resources. Charlie, did you want to enter it now, sir?
Sure.
Go ahead, please.
Move that we reduce the overall operating budget for HR to reduce it by $20,000.
Seconder, please.
Oh, I'll second it just to put it on the table.
Who wishes to speak?
If I can find the budget line, you have the page for human resources.
HR is page 44, 45 for operating.
Right, thank you. So Human Resources is requesting an increased funding in consulting fees, increased funding for testing and recruitment, and corporate training and development is up by about $35,000 this year. The budget is not unreasonable, but I think that they could still
potentially save an additional 20 grand on for taxpayers, and they can choose, Human Resources can see fit as to how they will make those reductions, so.
It was a global reduction of the overall budget.
Seconder wish to speak, Councilor Reggie? Councilor Desjardins, were you wanting the Director of HR to respond, or we just?
I don't, but if somebody else would like to, or if HR would like to respond, they're more than welcome to. I'm not opposed to them coming
Well,
up.
the rest of the council certainly knows that that is available. You haven't been asked a question yet, so.
Somebody from HR come over and ask a question.
Go on. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Councilor Berry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Ms. Poole. Actually, just going back to Councillor Desjardins' motion on that, the one that kind of popped out in my mind here when we're talking about this 20,000 reduction is labor relations for both fire and police are up a fair amount, and yet we have no contract talks going on. Like, why do we need almost a $10,000 increase in those two lines when there's no negotiations going on? So that's an area I'm looking at that could be part of that 20,000.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Berry, we actually used to have two different line items. We used to have professional fees for each union group, and then we had a labor relations line for each group. We've actually combined those, so I don't believe we've increased them at all. It was just a combination of the two put into one account. Yeah, we didn't reduce, or we didn't increase or reduce. We just combined the two lines.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, just observation.
Thank you. Councilor Reggio next.
Thank you. Linda, I asked this to all the managers yesterday, and the answer was always positive. If memory serves me right, you mentioned something about a benefits review. Do we not have someone on staff who can do this rather than go out and hire a consultant?
Through Your Worship, to the councillor, we really don't. We don't have someone who has the expertise in dealing in that specific area. We have one payroll person who, I'll say, administers the benefits, but not someone who's dedicated to that area specifically. We have a very small payroll area. There's only 3 employees in there. Aside from getting our 600 plus employees paid every 2 weeks, they have to do all the associated remittances to CRA and WCB and LTD, all the different things that we do. So they certainly wouldn't have, 2 or 3 months to dedicate to this kind of a project.
Okay, Councilor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am a bit curious about the lines Councillor Desjardins mentioned, specifically testing, recruitment, staffing, and corporate training and development. And I'm just curious how related those two lines are to sort of health and safety within the organization.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Patterson, they're not too related. So the first one, the testing and recruitment, that is specifically for new hires. So that is when the departments are. I'll use 911 as an example. When we hire new 911 employees, we put them through a fairly rigorous testing phase before they even start to ensure that they have the required multitasking skills, vision, all the different kinds of things that we need the operators to be able to do. Our success rate in those tests are maybe around 50%, so we actually do weed out quite a few of candidates who likely wouldn't be able to, for example, type as fast as they need to when dealing with emergency calls. So it's, the testing is specifically for that kind of thing. We also do, it's called a preview assessment for people who are potentially moving into management positions. They have to have some pretty core competencies to be able to do those kinds of positions. So all of these are testing we do to ensure we're hiring the right person so that we don't incur more costs further down the road. So the corporate training and development is for our hired employees. So those are the ones that we do have hired, and we obviously, with a workforce of 600 plus people, we need to provide them with some ongoing training. So you're right, it's safety training, it's leadership training, it's on-the-job training, it's pretty much all facets of a workplace environment that they need ongoing training on. That's the kind of thing that's in there.
Okay, don't have any other hands up. Thank you, Linda. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Patterson?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention that I will be voting against this. I think that the testing mentioned and the ongoing training, I think combined those two budget lines are maybe at most $70,000, and I think that's really important, especially with some of the services that employees in the City of Brandon provide. We need to make sure that they are up to date and that we are also creating as safe a workplace as possible.
Very good. Any further discussion? Who wishes to close?
Just very quickly, I think that 20,000 is not a ridiculous amount to ask Human Resources to find savings in, and there were other line items there we could have brought up, but I feel confident that this can be done while still making sure that training is done and people are safe on the job, and I have confidence in Ms. Poole that she can find those savings.
Call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I'm not sure if this completely, there was one in reserve appropriations eliminating from the cumulative benefits reserve. Not sure if that relates to HR, if we need the Director of HR here for that one. That relates to your department, Linda? Okay. Well, let's get it cleaned off. Councillor Chaboy, you want to, it was yours?
Sure, just give me a second. I just want to get to that page in the reserves. Yeah, this is in reference to page 12 of the reserve accounts. My understanding is that we have a fairly healthy reserve there, 200,000, and so what I'm asking there is just a reduction that won't affect it, because it didn't sound like this was a reserve that was used, implemented, so it seems like what's the point of having allocating further funds, and might as well just reduce it. So anyways, that's why I was asking for support of this one. Eliminating it.
Seconder, please? Or did I get a seconder? No, I didn't. Sorry. Seconder on this, please. Councillor Barry? So sorry, I did have you speak to it a little bit before we got a seconder, but that happens. I don't know whether sort of finance can help us here a little bit. This particular one kind of contains this floating $75,000 for severance, contract severance that goes in and out every year, and we don't generally use it, but we in effect move it out of the reserve into HR for the year, so that in the event we ever had a severance that we needed some funds, usually the severance was if we have to do a payout, I guess you could say, are capable of being contained in the department that they typically come from, but in the event there was something more extraordinary, this is sort of sitting there to buffer that. We haven't had to use it, so then it gets kind of moved back in again. So we just kind of go back and forth there. And so the balance wouldn't really technically ever decline. As Councillor Chaboy has pointed out, it's sitting at 279. If we don't ever use that thing, it'll be 279 forever. So reducing it by, what did you move? 25,000 is going to have a big effect. But I'd ask the administration, how would can we actually, as admin did before, transfer it into, like you did that, we remove some and transfer it, so it would actually help the mill rate? Okay, is that your intention, Councillor Chaboy?
That's right.
Okay. Now, with the comments I made, I don't know if Linda has anything to add to what I just said about how this operates, and if it's going to have any impacts to have it less.
To you, Your Worship, that's bang on, really. It's a payment in case we have to pay somebody out for whatever reason. So it could be that we're eliminating a position and we have to pay it out. or, there are some contracts that exist that if the person left, not of their own accord, we would have to pay a certain amount of times worth of salary. So it is to protect the corporation against that, really. And you're correct, it goes into the reserve every year and then gets moved again. So hasn't gone up.
If I may, Your Worship, so further to what Linda has commented here, that, like if somebody was, asked to leave not on their own accord and we had to, pay them, depending on the timing of the year and the level of that position, like that $204,000 could potentially disappear pretty quick. So it is kind of an insurance account for us if something were to happen and we couldn't accommodate it within the current year's operating budgets.
Well, it's technically 279,000. I think you could say we have 279 in reserve somewhere for this scenario. So, okay. Further discussion on this one? Everybody understands? Mover wish to close?
No, I think that we still have a healthy reserve there regardless of just a reduction here. So I'm hoping council will support it because it's not going to hurt. I don't think it'll hurt our operation at all.
Good. I'm going to call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, now, unless there's something I'm missing, I don't see anything else that reflects HR. Okay, thank you for coming, Linda. I'm advised that lunch is here. Now, is it, okay, so it is warm lunch. So I apologize to anybody that got here already and hasn't gotten to speak, other than we'll put more water in the soup and you can come and eat it. We'll adjourn. Again, let's, they probably have a schedule for like an hour, and that's probably far more than we need, so let's take about a half an hour, whatever it takes. So we'll reconvene.